arguing that I'm the face it needs to be, but it's indisputable that the individual who's the true face it needs to be, the host of these wonders, folks, it's Sam Sachs. Sam, welcome.
Hey, welcome back around. Top 5 of hottest guys on TV. I'll still have on your show.
Well, hey, I didn't know that I was in the top hottest guy, so this is truly like I'm really happy to hear that. Well, folks, the next individual who I am bringing on, you might have already sensed who this person was. If you're feeling a little bit of a demonic presence and also, a motherly presence, well, that's because I have Demon Mama here. Demon Mama, welcome.
Hello, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on. I love the beautiful dog picture behind you. I watched your Stardew Valley stream the other day, and I'm going to ask you real quick, Demon Mama, Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing?
Oh, okay. I haven't played Animal Crossing to a great degree.
Oh, I'm going to believe you. I'm going to believe you.
Okay.
Okay.
I love Stardew Valley, though. Also, if you use the petting machines, stop. Auto petters, get out. Auto petters, get out. That is the type of automation I do not stand for.
Well, when you start Animal Crossing, we will have to visit each other's islands on stream, and I will give you one of the dick shirts that I made in Animal Crossing. Yeah. All right, folks. Well, the next person is one of my favorite people, one of the sweetest people on the entire internet. I am a little bit butthurt because this individual decided to rip me off, copy the dog cam that I introduced to the world on Twitch. But nonetheless, I'm very happy to see this person's dog. It's Lance from the Surfs. Lance, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor to finally be on Dystopian Times Live.
Yes, it's a long time coming, but it's really nice to have you on. And yeah, thank you, Lance.
Is this like a game show? Is it going to be like that British one? I hope so.
We can turn it into a game show. We can turn it into a game show.
You're going to give out points that don't matter or mean anything?
Yes. I could do that. I could give away prizes that are hilarious, like Dave Rubin's book. That's what I won on the Surfs TV show. So yeah, definitely.
Actually, I would probably be right there. By the way, I just haven't shipped it, but I could pull it out to prove that it exists.
I would love. Look, I've been looking forward to this, Lance, and I feel like you're denying me the joy of reading Dave Rubin's book. So it'd be nice to have that. Just saying, Lance. No, it's okay. It's okay. All right, folks. The next individual is riding high right now. Aside from the fact that they're being cooked because they live in the same location as me, off of a really huge debate that was very useful to me because it stopped me from having a panic attack as I watched the Nina Turner Chantel Brown race. I still had a panic attack actually, but nonetheless, I was a little bit more distracted thanks to Vosh. Welcome to the show, Vosh.
Hello. Actually, tragically, Nina Turner's campaign team reached out to me and said the reason that she didn't win was because leftists were distracted by my debate with Charlie, and they didn't turn out to vote. So, actually, that one's on me. I'm sorry, guys. Super bad planning on my part.
At least you're owning up to it. At least you're owning up to it. Blame Vosh for Nina Turner, folks. And by the way, Vosh, thank you so much. So when I went on your charity stream, you recommended Castlevania on Netflix. I binged that in like a week. So that was a great recommendation. It was very, very good. So thank you for that.
Não, fizeste
Since we have so many brilliant people here, I want to open it up to a discussion topic that's kind of been on my mind lately, possibly because it's affecting me as well, and that is doomerism, disproportionately on the left among younger people. So, we saw Bernie Sanders lose in 2020. We just saw Nina Turner lose. We are dealing with, a pandemic, a housing crisis, a student loan crisis. And every time we turn to the news and if they're talking about climate change, which is fairly rare about climate change, it's always bad news. This week we got the IPCC's new report, and it looks really, really bad. So my question to the panelists is, how do we keep people engaged amid all of the doomerism? Because the way that I kind of feel sometimes, and I don't necessarily vocalize this because I don't want to discourage people, but I kind of feel like nihilism is a little bit alluring. I always feel this instinct to check out. Like every extra loss that we feel, Bernie Sanders losing, Nina Turner losing, I always feel the instinct to check out of politics. And, I fight that. But I know that young people, they also feel that urge as well. And so I try to find ways to keep them engaged in politics that are destructive. Try to find ways to get them to channel their anger and disillusionment with electoral politics and capitalism. But sometimes I don't have all the answers. And I don't necessarily think that there's a perfect answer. Hence why I kind of wanted to bring in all of the wonderful people here. Lance, what are your thoughts on this? Like, what's the one thing that you think is helpful in trying to keep people engaged, and not just during election years, but during off years like now? It's such an open-ended question, so feel free to take it where, it is a lot.
Yeah, well, I was hoping I was going to be like the third person, so there'd be like, generations watch it to be sad. That's how don't give in to their desires. Instead, I'm going to be like, take some time, please, to log off, like everyone.
Yes.
People use that as an insult, but sometimes it's nice to, touch grass, touch ass, touch sand. Sand is coarse, and all that kind of stuff. But it does help people know. In terms of what's going on, I'd say maybe we should celebrate victories more boisterously. I don't know if there's a better word I'd use for that, because there are still leftist victories going on all around the world, and not just concentrating on Canada and the United States, but if you look at Central and South America, there has been some very good decided pushes towards leftist governments. I know they are problematic. I'm not going to try and open up the wall of the can of worms here and just talk about the geopolitics going on around the world, but there are more victories than sometimes people think, and we just concentrate on the news itself. It's very hyper-commercialized. It makes us think, well, the vaccine apparently doesn't work 100% of the time. We were promised invincibility. Jesus instead we're getting 97% Jesus. Like, what the hell is going on, right? Whereas there's we concentrate on the other good news. There are places where mass vaccination is happening, like in British Columbia, the numbers are floating, stuff like that. Sorry, we're talking about.
No, I think that's a great start. I tend to focus on the negative, and part of it is, and Sam probably has the same problem. We cover the news, and almost all of the news is negative. Like, whenever there is a victory, I tend to try to over-celebrate it, and oftentimes it's difficult. Do you want to weigh in on this, Sam? Because you're the other, news video person on the panel, and everyone else is kind of video/streaming, but, how do you deal with this issue? Because I'm afraid, just like with videos that I post and covering certain news stories, that it's going to turn people off to electoral politics and politics in general, and I'm trying not to do that, but at the same time, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Sometimes maybe we can use tourism to make it some sort of a spark or be the catalyst that encourages someone to get up and get involved, perhaps join DSA or something of that nature. But how do you deal with this now?
It's tough. There is a thin line, I guess, between doomerism and false optimism and trying to figure out where to draw the line. Things are bad, and we have to recognize that, tell people that. I do think that there is a bit of a problem in terms of taking a bigger picture that people don't like to Lance mentioned. There are victories happening in South America, big victories, rewriting a Pinochet-era constitution in Chile, socialists coming to power in Bolivia and Peru. And it seems like here in the U.S. the sort of doomerism popularity, or the notion that there is no left, you hear that repeated a lot in sort of leftist media circles, which is kind of odd for someone like me who's kind of been paying attention to politics for 20 years, and there was no left 20 years ago. I can assure you there's a lot more of something resembling a left today than there has been at any other point in my lifetime. And yeah, someone can counter and say, well, it's not like it was in the 30s and when we had militant labor unions and we had labor unions, third workforce in the labor union. Sure, we're not there, and we may not ever get there, but there is an entire left media ecosphere. There's a lot more organizing on the left than there's been at any time in my life, and all of us are here as a result of this new left space that's been created. When I first started doing this, I was working for a guy named Tom Hartman, who is a progressive radio talk show host, and he was one of the few games in town, 15 years ago, and I was working on RT with people like Abby Martin, and that was one of the few places that you could sort of get anti-imperial leftist news content. And now there's just so many more sources. I guess, you know, debate can be had of whether or not that's advanced our goals, but I think it has, very much so. So people just joining politics, you know, with the Bernie Sanders world, I can understand how disappointed they are by things. People who jumped in seeing Dennis Kucinich as the best option for the left on like the wings of a debate stage being ridiculed. You know, there might be a little bit more optimism to the situation, but I guess there's a perspective here, and you know, I bring that perspective and try to tell people, you know, what I'm seeing. But at the same time, the IPCC report and the situation with climate change and the enormous task in front of us, it's hard to repel the doomerism. We just have to lie in wait, like, for an opportunity. There's been doomers on the street for the left. Like, it's kind of the default situation for us.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that Bosch said after Super Tuesday in 2020. Basically, you were talking to your audience, and I was tuning in, and you told them, look, Bernie Sanders, you know, he got blown out. This was before he was out of the primary, I believe. And you were saying losses are kind of just like an inevitable thing. This is part of the process, and if you're going to be engaged in politics, you have to kind of expect this thing. You have to acknowledge that this is going to happen. And especially if you're a leftist, and I'm paraphrasing what you said, of course, this isn't verbatim, but you know, if you're a leftist, you kind of have to expect that people are always going to be the underdog. This is a perpetual state of your life. People are fighting for the good thing. And I tried to like use that message, but you know, make it my own. But I felt like it was really hopeful. Do you have anything like to add with regard to that message, Bosch? Because I felt like that was one thing that I tried to use to like keep my nieces and nephews who were like old enough to vote for the first time for Bernie Sanders engaged after the primary. You know, I'm varying success, right? Some of them, gone, but you know, some of them are still engaged in politics. Like, what's your overall take on this? Like, what's your advice for the youth, Bosch?
Yeah, unfortunately, and I don't think this is exclusive to the left, but I do think it's a problem. I think there's an unfortunate narcissism in left-leaning activism among some groups that reminds me a little bit of the logic of conspiracy theories. And you set aside all the irrationality of conspiracy theory. The underlying emotional core of it is that there's some broad truth people accept, but you're the one who knows what's really going on, and you're part of some epic battle against the establishment that be. And then ultimately, all this knowledge you have is part of the narrative, where you are part of the underdog overthrowing whatever system, whatever they believe on. Anti-Semites, they all have their theories. Now, of course, leftists are the underdog in virtually every sense politically, but our fight for civil rights isn't a narrative. A lot of people get it in their head that, like, oh, like in 2016, they realized, oh my God, you know, you're right, we are being screwed over by the oligopoly. And then Bernie Sanders makes them aware of this, and then they get super duper 6 months later when he loses. And it's like, you're an infant. You did your columnist. Can you tell me any point in history, any group of left-leaning people who you would think like accomplished everything they wanted, or hell, any group of ideologically motivated individuals at any point in history, you ever think, in all of human history, do people who get involved in politics ever die happy? No, we never do. So stop expecting that your life is going to be part of some 3-act arc where we overcome all the problems that you were made aware of in your lifetime. It's not going to be. You're going to set yourself up for misery. Focus on things from that narrative perspective. So no, that's not how it works, okay? People, tens of billions of people have died throughout human history thinking that they were facing the end times, watching their civilizations collapse, their ethnic groups being exterminated, plague ravaging their land, famine, drought. Sometimes they were wicked, sometimes they were wrong. But the narrative of recognizing injustice and then overcoming it singly in their lifetime, it's a fake narrative. Latching onto it will only worsen your mood in the long run. But there is a solution, and it's a very simple one, okay? Focus on yourself. Make yourself the kind of person who is good at advocating for the things you care about. That's what you need to focus on. your day-to-day process, the thing that you adhere to, the thing that you base your food around, isn't what you see in the news that day. It's how effectively am I acting as the agent of my own good? Stay happy, stay healthy, stay educated, and when the time arises that you may be useful to some service or cause, go for it. And that's what you should focus on. And if you do that, you'll be an infinitely better advocate for your ideals than somebody who engages in the opportunistic, bandwagoning of hitching a ride to whatever that they think might have a chance of passing over the press, realizing it won't, sinking into depression for 6 years, and then writing the next one. It is an ineffective and counterproductive cycle. Focus on yourself, and by being good to yourself, be good to the world.
Yeah, I love that point. It kind of goes back to Lance's point about like touching grass and whatnot. And I made this point a couple of weeks ago in my program. Every once in a while, we have to recalibrate, I feel like. Right? And I think that's a great point, Rush. You're kind of alluding to this idea that like we all in some way suffer from character syndrome. I mean, we're all podcast hosts and news journalists, so certainly to a degree we experience that. But I think a lot of people visualize their the beginning of their political journey as the start of all of politics, when in actuality you're jumping in and you're trying to continue a movement. One thing that really bothers me is there's this sentiment that goes beyond doomerism. It really is disempowering, where people think, you know what, democracy in America is flawed, therefore there's no reason to participate. Now, is democracy flawed? Absolutely. I think that we need to do away with the Electoral College. I think that we need to end gerrymandering and remove our first past the post electoral system, because I don't want there to be a two-party system, perpetually. Having said that, though, democracy has never been like just this thing that you establish and is perfect as it is. In the United States of America, at least, I don't even think you can argue that we were a real democracy at the beginning. But as we grow as a country, you keep adding to that project. Like each generation, in my opinion, kind of like contributes in their way to democracy and further enhancing, the democratization of the United States. It's never perfect, and trying to like stop people before they check out once they jump in, and trying to like change their expectations for the better so that way it's more appropriate. I think that's a really important thing. Demon Mama, did you want to jump in here? Because I know that you like. When I tune into your stream, you do a really good job at mixing up like very, very like sad political issues, heavy topics, but then there's always this sense of like, camaraderie between you and your chat, and you'll cool down with video games. And like, what do you think is like the best thing to like keep people engaged? Because basically, this is my thing here. I get people, like I'm the boring news guy, and people tune in during elections, and once they're there, I try to stop as many people as possible from leaving and keep them engaged. But that's not necessarily something that I'm not going to have a 100% success rate. So, in your opinion, like what do you do to keep people engaged and stop them from being a political nihilist? This is such a tough question to answer, but like if you want to share your thoughts just in general.
This is something that I've been thinking about increasingly over the course of my career as a streamer and over the course of my involvement in politics. And I've been interested in politics for a very, very long time. And I've come to this position where I believe in a very, organic form of politics. I think that it's good and well for us to be informed on many topics to the greatest degree that we can, and of course we have to sort of select those carefully. But I think one thing that there is a hunger for and that we're lacking is connecting that in a real way to people's lives, the day-to-day moments of their lives. I think, especially here in the United States, like a lot of our politics centers around just like these like checkpoints of like an election or a bill that might pass. And a lot of times we spend sort of just like digging into the details of such a thing when long after the fact, after we passed our votes or decided on our representatives or whatever, there's nothing really we can even do to touch that thing. I like to focus, and I've been increasingly focusing on things that people can touch. So, and this is incredibly true right now as we're talking about climate change and we're talking about COVID and some of these other they're dooms. They are apocalyptic scenarios that are so large that they're things that humans have grappled with through all of history. And I think that one of the ways that we do that is by taking the focus and turning it sort of tuning the focus a little bit closer to us. Saying, okay, so who am I connected to? Who do do I know? How can I make sure that these people are going to be okay? How can I make sure that I don't see neighbors starving, or that my family is hungry? What are the things that I can do? Who can I connect with that will help me lift myself up, and that I can help lift them up? And I think this is something that I've been increasingly interested in. One of the reasons why my stream is so community focused, and I focus on encouraging people. We do community events on my Discord all the time, specifically with the goal of getting people to meet each other and build actual social bonds. Because and it's limited. There's only so much that a content creator can do. A content creator ideally doesn't run like a church or anything like that, or move. There's only a certain level. But people are shockingly alienated right now. People are shockingly atomized. They find themselves almost sometimes blindsided. I know that happened to me, where it's like circumstances of life had me moving after job, and it's like suddenly I don't know anybody around me. I don't know who do I know. I connect with people on the internet, and then sometimes you connect with people who are near you, and you can build these sort of networks. And I feel like that, like rebuilding these connections, rebuilding like material connections between people is just so incredibly important. And I've done 2 sort of big streams recently focusing on how we can actually do that. How do people visualize their relationship? How do people visualize their participation in politics? And I'm a little different than I think, I do cover electoral politics, but I'm probably the most humor on this panel of like the electoral aspect. Doesn't mean I don't think you should vote. You should be informed. I really, really do. But I think that a lot of people get into the habit of watching things unfold when there are things that they can do in their life right now. Those small actions. It could be building a better political foundation for the world that they want to see happen. And something that I think about a lot as like a small offhand example of this is something like gardening. And that seems like such a small thing. But learning a skill like that, a skill that can be shared with the community, if more people actually do that, they're not just themselves, but their community becomes stronger. They're sharing a skill that can keep people alive. And if you can encourage people to pursue those types of skills, to talk to each other. One of the reasons why my Discord has a huge creative section that is specifically designed for people to share information about how to make art, how to make things themselves, how to teach each other, like how to use the tools that they're doing. The reason why I believe in that is because I think that people take those things off the internet and then they put them into the world, and the world changes. It is a direct one-to-one thing, and I think that really is something that defeats consumerism. I think that we've gotten into a state where we're very much politics is a spectator sport. People have heard that term before, but it's very much so. When everything is deferred, when all of politics is sort of viewed as deferred across these big, or these big milestone events of an election or whatever, when there are things that you can do to be making your community, your particular political context, even if it's a online political context, stronger, more powerful, more capable of directly influencing the world around them. I think that's incredibly important for consumers.
I think that's a really great point because, politics is everything. So you're not going to fully detach politics from your life, but you can kind of decenter it and distract yourself, for lack of a better word. I think that's really important because, like for me, I got to the point where I would basically base my entire mood on the outcome of a political election. And that's so unhealthy, which is why I think that like Lance's recommendation of touching grass and touching ass, whichever you prefer, if not both maybe, it really is important. And Lance, you do a lot of good distraction streams, like you do movie night on the Surfs. Did you want to add anything to this? Because I think that's actually a really constructive thing to say for younger people.
I will add this. Like, if you are actually humor about the current state of things, and I can understand why, like, keep in mind what was the scene in 2016, like pre-2016, before Bernie Sanders runs, right? Before everyone was galvanized, before everyone suddenly thought that saying like, oh, I'm a social democrat or I'm a democratic socialist was something that was acceptable at the dinner table and not something that would have your parents be like, communist, execute him or anything like that, right? Like all of a sudden it was like everyone was talking about this and hey, wait, that'd be interesting theory, we're going to read about this stuff and now we're all united and then there's this old man who's galvanizing all of us and he's getting us all excited about all these ideas that yes, all the money is being funneled to the very rich and the working class are being fucked over, we don't have any more unions anymore, we don't have any more worker co-ops anymore, and everything is fucking terrible and they're pointing the finger at things that don't matter, they're pointing the finger every day at the immigrants, so yes, it's the people from across the pond that are going to attack us, that's the real problem. Meanwhile, people are fucking us over right here, and I said it doesn't matter if it's in Canada or America, so people can become united, people can come together and get galvanized and do, like, I would say decisive action. We just need to be inspired and do something about it.
Yeah, there is a positive frame that you can put on the doomerism, and sure there are, people who use it for, benefit, to get views, to get clicks, whatever. But the sudden rise in it does reflect people's expectations of what the government should provide for them and what sort of material interests should be met. People are getting this doomer feeling because their expectations have increased and their conditions have not increased, and the gap between those things is disheartening, especially, and not just in the near term and now, but especially in the future. As you look at a world that's going to be changing due to climate change, it's only going to get worse. So, people weren't really despairing that much in 2010. I don't remember. I mean, we were, legislation was the debt ceiling stuff. That was what's going on, and it sucked. But there wasn't this it's kind of was like, oh, well, this is just kind of the way it is. This is politics in America. There's no left, there's Democrats and Republicans. But I think that, and it's not just Bernie, it was the material conditions on the ground after the financial collapse that was never resolved, and people just kind of getting eviscerated with, not their wages not going up and having to fill out their credit card to make ends meet and going into debt. There are all sorts of reasons that Bernie comes along and articulates these things. And I think a bunch of people suddenly oh, we can have better things. We can organize our society in a different way. And when that didn't happen immediately, because Bernie wasn't elected, and even if he was, it wouldn't have happened, let's face it, it turned into this well, you're not meeting our expectations that have rapidly increased. And I mean, there's theorists who have written about this, Davies and other people, how revolutions are started and stuff. But I don't see a revolution anytime soon. But the fact that you're getting this, you have people's expectations of what society should look like have to be there. And you can look at the entire neoliberal project as been an effort to lower people's expectations of what the social contract should be, what the government should provide to you. And it seems like we're finally starting to chip away at those ideas and start developing new ideas of what we're owed, what as citizens of the U.S., what our lifestyle should be like.
Yeah, that's really important perspective because things are different now than they were. Things now that are being discussed weren't even discussed at all, like Medicare for all, for example. We don't have Medicare for all yet, but we have shifted the Overton window. Sorry,
the healthcare debate in 2009, when Obama came in, was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah,
where you had people like Joe Lieberman and Ben Nelson, who, as bad as Joe Manchin is today, I can't stand the man. Ben Nelson and Joe Lieberman were the foils, and they were far, far worse. You wouldn't see these guys advancing a $3.5 trillion framework, I guess it is right now. We'll see what it is at the end of the day. So,
yeah, that's a great point.
I'm not sure.
I think
I just had a little bit of a different perspective. Oh, sorry. I think there's a little bit of a delay. I apologize. If you want to go first, go for it.
Oh, sure. No, I mean, yeah. I just want to say, I think the main character syndrome hit it on the head. I think that there's an incredible degree of counterproductive self-centeredness. Imagine if you could anthropomorphize the history of American progressivism. You somehow had some 150-year-old organism who was responsible in all ways for all progress made in this country. Imagine, like, from the perspective of that individual, watching somebody enter politics in 2016, and then, like, after 2 years of being involved, be like, ugh, this doesn't work. Nothing's going to work. And then drop out. It's like, okay, we would have nothing if everyone throughout history had that attitude. I mean, nobody ever gets clean wins. If all the union organizers back at the beginning of the 20th century had been as willing to give up because of the seeming insurmountability of their opponents, then we would have nothing. And our workers would have nothing. I mean, they had bombs dropped on them. We have people, and I don't want to get into this, isn't like a millennial sensibility thing. I think a lot of it is just that we don't have a very strong existing infrastructure or a willingness for sort of a means of effective engagement. That, and I think people are more and more making politics their personality, which is problematic for a number of reasons, not the least of which is because the needs towards change in a political system and the needs to define yourself as a person do not always coincide. And when you try to make them the same thing, that's going to lead people to make personality-driven political decisions and politically based personality choices, and both of those can be really, really destructive. Politics is slow, arduous, gradual, messy, and often unproductive. Personalities are the fanciful whims of whatever you think you are at the time. That's great, and that's how it always should be. But there's not much personality to be had in, yep, politics is slow struggle, and we're just going to keep at it for decades and decades, enjoying small victories and suffering small losses forever. Like, that's not, people don't like that. It's not exciting. So people want to get involved almost to a parasocial extent with the political happenings of their time period, and it just leads to people making really bad decisions.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jimmy Mama, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I actually have some sort of disagreements with Sam and Wash has said here. So, the first one that I was going to respond to was the idea that, like, people had asked for more and then gotten less. I actually don't think that's true. I think people have asked for less and still gotten less. I think that, like, the average, like, and this is somewhat anecdotal, but I would love to see, like, in a broader scale look into this. But I think that people have been lowering their expectations. I think I remember when I was younger, most of my peers were like, yeah, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a house someday. Nobody thinks that now. The people I know, even my peers, some of my peers were doing well, sometimes feel lucky to have an apartment because of how rough things are right now. So I think that people have continually lowered their expectations and found that the answer is still lacking. When it comes to politics, there's this like sort of trite saying that I kind of like to keep in mind, which is do not wait to strike until the iron is hot, but make it hot by striking. And I think that is a good way of looking at politics. I think a lot of times we're sort of lulled into this constant waiting period. We're waiting for this, we're waiting for this, we're waiting for this. And that's one of the areas where I sort of disagree with Wash a little bit. I don't really think that you can separate personal and political in the same way. Like, political movements are often very inorganic or very organic and very messy. They are sometimes flashes in the pan. Sometimes the energy that arises is like almost unpredictable, like we have with something like the George Floyd like protests and stuff, which and they're going up against a system that is very cold and calculated. But the thing is that we don't always have to wait on that system. And again, that's not to say that there's no need to participate when the chance comes to vote. It's just there's all this time and all of this energy in between. Something that has really shaped my outlook on politics was living through a couple of disasters. When I lived in California before I started streaming, we lived through one of the worst wildfire seasons, and only now surpassed by this wildfire season. And we had our power just shut off. Like, one day, we just got a letter, or we got a phone call, and they said, hello, your area has been selected for a power shutoff in order to prevent forest fires. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't contest it because the state has given the power to the power company to make that call, and they did. And then our power was gone. The power for our entire town was gone, and nobody was ready for it. We didn't have power. We just lost. I couldn't watch screens. I couldn't research anything. I couldn't do my job. And there was no recourse. The only recourse was to try and solve the problem. And and we ended up like talking to our neighbors. We ended up like finding out who had a generator. We ended up like actually solving issues that arose when that like infrastructure was taken away at last. And we didn't wait for anything. No aid came. We never got aid from the government. We never got aid from any of the local political parties. That aid just didn't come. And when COVID hit here in Seattle, where I live, I was involved for a long time with this incredible mutual aid group that's like organized by some anarchist collective. And it was incredible. And they did that exact same thing. There was all this fighting back and forth in Congress, all this, why is the money going to come? Is the money going to come? They put up a Google sheet, and they orchestrated. At the last time that I was working with them, which was some time ago, I know that they've raised a lot of money, $300,000 worth of groceries and groceries delivery to people who were so in need of food that they were searching Facebook for groups that would be able to give them food. This wasn't like a party that was giving food to its members. This was people who were out of food, and they were looking for it, and they put food into the mouths of those people, giving those people another day to live. I think that changing our focus to that sort of politics, a politics that can be a bit more accepting of people's sort of personal weirdness and their personality and their organicness. A politics that is willing to engage with that at face value without judgment and move forward with that organic assumption built in, I think is very, very powerful. And I think we should focus on that.
I kind of see common ground, not to be, the fence sitter here between you and Bosch. I think that there's common ground on that particular statement, because I do think that, your personality, I think there's some benefits to that being linked to politics, but I do see how it can become something that's problematic. Perhaps it depends on the personality. I mean, we can all think of individuals who have very problematic personalities on the left, who I won't name, but it just kind of depends on the situation and perhaps the personality. But Bosch, I'll let you weigh in on that.
Oh no, I just think that in a lot of ways, we should treat our political engagement with the kind of steadfast and tenacious involvement that we would say a job. Not that saying that we need to commit 8 hours a day to it or anything like that, but that as a part of our interest in and willingness to contribute to a broader collective goal, we make it something that we care about, we treat it as such, and we do so with some degree of seriousness. But we do so with the understanding that the responsibilities for taking the effects of our actions, they extend beyond just us. They're not just a reflection of our personal willpower, our personal wishes. I'll give you an example. Okay, Biden. I don't like Biden. I've never liked Biden. I didn't like voting for Biden, but I did vote for Biden. If I consider a vote an extension of my personality, a reflection of my personal interest and identity, then I would have simply not voted, or I would have voted for a third party candidate. But I don't. I consider it a stark utilitarian choice. I was the least terrible person who was a shot to the so I cast a vote for Biden. A lot of people turn it into this big identity thing, that they're not the sort of person who would vote for Biden, or they're not the sort of person who would look at what's going on in the world today and continue to invest time and energy into it because things are going so poorly that it's easier, it's emotionally easier to just withdraw. And that's what a lot of people are doing. They're withdrawing. They're saying, this just doesn't work, it's never going to work, we're doomed. They kind of just want to cross their arms and smirk as everything else falls apart. I think this is a horribly counterproductive attitude. There are people who have done a lot of good in much, much, much worse circumstances than what we're dealing with today. Obviously I'm a live streamer, so I've got nothing to complain about. But even like a lot of left-leaning people today in this country probably can't hold a candle to what the left fell back at the beginning of the 20th century, or how the left fell back during World War II. Or, like, for example, when America refused to take Jews that were being sent out from Germany prior to their execution, I imagine how being a leftist must have felt at that time, like seeing all of that happen. It's always been a process of suffering. But they still did good work back then, So, if all of them, they throw their hands up, nothing but a revolution will fix this, we never would have gotten anything. But that is a very personality-based decision. It's a product of an emotional fallibility, an emotional investment into what's going on and a need to withdraw to shelter your own emotions. That's why after Bernie Sanders lost, I didn't have much of a problem endorsing Biden right after. It's not because I didn't love Bernie, because I wasn't disappointed. It's not because I liked Biden. It's because it was never about how I felt. So it was an easy choice.
I mean, it's sort of it, right? I mean, voting is sort of how you feel. I don't think I take that view where people who, didn't want to vote for Biden somehow put their personality above what was good for the country at the time. Because, it treads awfully close on scolding powerless people on what they should be doing in a system that does not provide them any options and has completely eviscerated them. So, ultimately, like the people who are sitting on the fence or didn't want to vote for Biden because they're too left of Biden is a very insignificant portion of the electorate and not really driving any of the bad, or their lack of participation isn't really what's responsible for what's the engine of destruction that's happening.
No, but that's kind of a deflection, right? It's a significant portion of the left. The discourse about burning or bust or not voting for Biden is super present online. It still is super, super present online. Is it a huge part of the electorate? No. We're talking about the mentalities of leftists here. Yeah, the person thinks that not voting is a preferable choice to voting for Biden. I'm okay, so
I mean, we're at probably the sort of, and I don't know, maybe there's more influence of that sort of sect of the left, but Biden still prevailed in the election despite, their whatever how many people held their nose up or didn't hold their nose up and chose not to vote.
Can I respond to that, Mike?
Yeah, Lance, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm totally on board with diversity of tactics. I think that's very, very important. I think that you should have people doing, you should have people doing unionization, you should have people doing worker cooperatives, all that kind of stuff. But in terms of harm mitigation, I think that's also incredibly important because if you don't engage in those kind of tactics, or even better yet, try to get progressive when leftists into office, then we see them around liberals and conservatives, and they dominate those arenas. And trust me, they are very invested in maintaining the levers of power, getting in there, making sure they stack the courts for judges, making sure they stack the courts for Supreme judges so it just haunts us for years to come. So the left can't kind of like stay by the side and be like, I'm going to do like a fourth party, or I'm going to do some kind of I don't know, I'm not voting just to show that I don't care about this process. Like, we cannot let that ground simply be controlled by conservatives and liberals, in my point.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't vote. I think, look, I'm a communist. I don't think the Democratic Party is ever going to get us to a situation where we need to go. But I do recognize, and I don't agree with people, I do recognize that you can still improve the lives of millions of people by electing Democrats over Republicans in certain situations. And I don't subscribe to the belief that, like, it's necessarily counterintuitive or counterproductive to any sort of anti-capitalist struggle to settle for electing Democrats in the short term. Otherwise, like, what's the point of fighting for things like Medicare for all, which isn't socialism or anything, and you could argue would delay whatever kind of heightened contradictions that could lead to a revolution or whatever down the road. So I don't really buy into that. But at the same time, I think that voting is the least effective type of politics you can engage in, or the least impactful or important type of politics you individually can engage in. And I think that yet we place so much importance on it, mainly because we all are kind of political commentators and reporters. So, we operate in this scene around elections all the time.
No, to me, maybe we shouldn't focus on it too hard. It's just, it seemed like so many people were making the objectively wrong choice. You know what I mean? It'd be like flushing after you take a shit. That's not a huge part of my brain. Like telling people they need to flush after they take a shit. But if I realized quite suddenly that all the people around me didn't do that, it would suddenly become a much bigger deal. I don't know. It just feels like very straightforward. You can buy it and whatever, even if it's the least important thing. It's still something you got to do. It's not to me so much of an issue because the online left represents a huge voting bloc, because it doesn't. To me, it was more of an issue of a sort of misplaced or misguided accelerationism. Because even if a leftist doesn't vote for Biden, like to me, it's not so much the vote I care about, it's that they're the type of leftist who doesn't see a difference between the kind of harm Biden can do versus the kind of harm Trump can do. And that to me suggests the existence of a whole other host of issues, which may be significantly more concerning than their actual singular vote, like that they can lead to a whole bunch of other stuff. Like people saying Biden is worse than Trump, or people underestimating the threat of fascism in this country, or people who think that Trump is better on foreign policy. It gets like this whole like a branching web.
I think there's too much hyperbole on the left, and I think that that's a problem. Like, there are many people online who will say there's zero difference between Donald Trump or Joe Biden, and there's some people who even self-identify as leftists who will argue that Joe Biden is worse than Donald Trump, which is, if you're a leftist, I don't think that there's an argument there. Having said that, though, I do recognize that, times are tough. Like, humorism is the subject, and for me, as a podcast host, I feel like I made a different political calculation than I would have if I wasn't a podcast host. So, like, after Bernie Sanders lost, I was very like, fuck Joe Biden. Like, I'm so done. I'm not going to vote for him. Fuck him. Like, on Super Tuesday, I was also like, that was a very, like, my dad died on Super Tuesday, so I see Bernie Sanders losing. My dad dies. So, at that point, emotionally, I was, like, so irrational. I was like, you know what? I live in Oregon. It doesn't matter what I do, and fuck Joe Biden, I'm not going to vote for him. But then as time went on, and Trump became more authoritarian, and I heard different perspectives, I thought, you know what, I can't just, hold my nose up in the air and say, you know what, I'm leftier than thou because I didn't vote for Joe Biden because I live in a swing state. Because at the same time, I'm telling my viewers, well, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden, but you definitely should if you live in a swing state. So it's kind of like this, there's this fakeness to it, right? And that's how I felt. Like, I felt like it wasn't fair that there's this expectation that, my swing state viewers support Joe Biden so we can stop Donald Trump, but I don't have to do that. I don't have to feel gross, about holding my nose. And it was Vosh's video where he was talking about Bernie or Bus, and I shared it on Twitter, and I got a lot of backlash because they were like, oh, well, how can you share this video when he's doing these ad hominem attacks calling people dumb fucks? I'm like, honestly, though, when he said dumb fuck, something clicked in me. I'm like, oh yeah, I am being kind of a dumb fuck here, and I should probably stop putting my emotions before everything. So basically, long story short, what I try to do is acknowledge that people are people, and we should have a diversity of tactics, as Lance was saying, and we should, I don't know, just try to do our best to keep people engaged. I have in 2016, for example, a lot of folks hated Hillary Clinton, myself included. For my mom, she registered to vote for the first time in her 60s for Bernie Sanders. And then after that, she's like, okay, well, I guess I'm back to being apolitical. I'm not going to vote. I don't care enough. And so voting for a third party for her, for Jill Stein back in 2020, well, if that's going to keep you engaged and you vote and then you vote down ticket for other Democrats, the Senate, I think that's perfectly fine. So, finding ways to keep people engaged is important to me, but it's not a perfect science because everyone is so different. A lot of people were probably turned off by Vosh calling everyone dumb fucks, but that actually resonated with me somehow because I'm a fucking weird person. But it worked for me, and sometimes we need to be shaped. Other people, you approach them more, softly and in a more, personable way. It kind of depends, but I'm rambling at this point. I think you wanted to jump in as well. I'll give you the last word on this before we move on to the next segment.
This is a topic I think is super interesting to me, and there's the whole touching on the whole Bernie or Bus thing. I mean, I think people are prone to be very emotional online in general. They state their sort of unfiltered thoughts into Twitter, and it can be hard to figure out what people are actually going to do with that. For the record, I made my own videos against the Bernie position because I think it doesn't help anything. I wish that people view voting as a strategic chore, as a thing that you've got to do because you want to set up the ground for being as easy as possible for you to get what you want. But that's kind of that's a hard sell when our entire political system tells us that voting is the the mark of your American identity. There's so much of that emotion that is infused in making the elections the sort of center of your personal politics, and I think that people feel a lot of disempowerment. I think that there is a sense that, like, yeah, I did the things I'm supposed to do, and that I've been told I was supposed to do my whole life, and it hasn't done anything for me. I'm still sitting here with no power in a mountain in California, or whatever, name what it is. If you want to go about COVID or whatever, name 100 different things. And I think that disempowerment is, like, sort of the underlying factor that inspires a lot of these, like, bad conclusions, because people conclude that they're disempowered, and they don't know why they're disempowered. They don't know what it is that's disempowering them. I really like that that Bosch was talking about like the sort of like old lefty politics, and I think it brings up something, or at least I would like to highlight something about like older leftist politics in America specifically that was based around bonds. Leftist politics in the past was based around a union or your community or the company town that you lived in. You would your farm, your friend's farm, these things where people had very real connections, and they could make that connection up to the next level, up to whatever next level of politics there is. They go, we need to get this president in here because our union will suffer, our community will suffer if that guy gets elected. I think it becomes easier to sell people on strategic votes and on voting as a block as opposed to voting as like a personal expression if they see their voting in the context of a community, of their votes laying a sort of foundation for this network of bonds that they have. I really, really fixate on alienation and the separation that a lot of people have these days, because I think it influences a lot of our politics. I also think that we have to start thinking about how communities are formed in a different way. I don't think we're ever going back to a union-based politics. I don't think we're ever going back to like party-based politics the same way that we used to. I don't know that unions are going to have like a big comeback. It'd be really interesting if they did. I think we did some really good stuff. But what I think we can start doing is we can start building structures like, and I'm very interested in building things. I think we can start building structures and building communities that allow people to like autonomously help one another in the right direction. And those people's bonds will drive them in a better direction than the direction that the society does. Which, if we look at the trends in employment, if we look at the trends in general well-being over the last like 10 years or so, over the Trump presidency especially, people work all the time, and our workplaces are increasingly alienated in themselves. You do jobs online, working from your own home. You don't know any of your coworkers. You work a gig job. You can't know any of your coworkers because they're all just random cars through an app. How are you going to build a sense of community? How are you going to build a sense of solidarity? We all recognize solidarity is vital to the politics of the left. Solidarity is like the underlying factor of left politics. But how do you do that? We need to figure that out. We have to figure out how we rebuild solidarity, actual solidarity. How do we, build bonds between people again that will inspire their politics? And I think that will have if we can figure out how to reconnect people, how to make people understand their context, they will be more interested in politics, and they're more likely to be willing to make a strategic vote on something like Biden. If they're truly convinced that they're not powerless, then they can go, oh yeah, whatever, sure, whatever, check it right off. I don't even think it has to be a matter of suppressing your emotions. I just think we have to change the emotional context. Say, yeah, it's not a big deal to vote for Biden. We're just doing a strategic vote. Now let's get back out there and let's do this thing with our online community, with our IRL, with our physical, like, household community or our town community. These things that give you a sense of feeling of political power because you can actually impact something around you, as opposed to sort of just like throwing your metaphorical paper airplane in the direction of Washington, D.C. and hoping to hear back someday while your power is still out. And I understand why people feel so poor. I understand why they feel so disempowered. Because, like, one of the things that has that distinguishes the modern left from the left of the past is that the left of the past went through the Cold War era and got all of their bonds systemically destroyed. Seriously, we're talking big organizations that have been broken and collapsed through strike breaking, through union busting, through deregulation, has completely shattered the bonds that were there. And we need to do that. We need those bonds. Those bonds are the foundation of everything else that comes after that.
Yeah, well, folks, I think that really, if you're watching this and you're not necessarily sure how to feel and the doomism, it is still like, it's overwhelming you. Maybe you could take pieces of what each of us said throughout the course of this and, fill in. Either way, one thing that I always find solidarity in is that, if Politics makes me feel like I'm going crazy. I'm not the only one, and we're all kind of like just going crazy together. But something that makes me feel even better is knowing how much crazier some people are, and we're as crazy as we may feel from leftist politics. It's not as bad as what we're about to see in this next segment. So on this week's weekly dose of stupidity, folks, I have really unfortunate news. White Boy Summer is canceled.
Dang. In a world of politics dominated by the strange, the deranged, and outright insane.
Hey guys, so
checking the craziest of what politics has to offer. This is your weekly dose of stupidity.
Well, this week, folks,
that's not this one.
shut up, Chad. We have some medical advice from the son of Tom Hanks. He's going to encourage everyone to get vaccinated, but there's going to be a little bit of a plot twist. So let's go ahead and watch.
Hey guys, so just checking in. Look, I've been kind of on the fence about this for a while. That's why I've never spoke on it. But with the amount of people that I know recently that have gotten COVID, and with like the numbers rising, I think it's important for me to say like, I got the vaccine. I think everybody should. I think it's really important, like, that we all do this. Just as like,
Now, if we pause it right here, this is a wonderful video, is it not? If we pretend as if he stops talking right here, I have no issue with this, but this is going to veer sharply in a very different direction.
citizens as Americans, we have to look out for each other and get the shit under control, guys. So, like, I suggest to all my followers, you guys make sure when they get the vaccine, first thing, science, bitch. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I never had COVID. You ain't sticking me with that motherfucking needle. It's the motherfucking flu. Get over it, okay? If you're sick, stay inside. I'm tired of having it. Okay? Why are we working around y'all? And y'all, if you're in nature, stay your ass inside. I'm tired of wearing a motherfucking mask.
The worst part is that you know that he's recording this thinking that he's killing it. But when I watch this, it makes me want to like climb the highest cliff and just like beat myself off of it in Roblox, of course. Folks, how do we deal with these people?
Well, I just want to remind everybody out there that Chet Hanks has a cameo that you can purchase for $1.99. So if you'd like to see anything else, perhaps something in patois or have you can order that on Cameo right now for $1.99.
It's the same price as Giuliani, isn't it?
Giuliani's on Cameo?
No.
Oh my god.
Yeah, wow. Further going.
Oh my god.
Wow.
I mean, I think there's the obligatory thing to say that obviously there are people who haven't gotten vaccinated for fairly legitimate reasons. We have a healthcare system that is built to exclude people, to leave people out, to not give people information about how they can get healthcare, where they can get healthcare. There are a lot of people who think they need health insurance to get the shot, even if that's not the case. Also, children can't get it, but I'm kind of a little tired of this notion that we have to, like, be easy on these anti-vaxxers or use persuasion. It's clear that that's not what's driving. To people, especially, and when I see someone like Chet Hanks, it makes me want to personally sign up for like a vaccine, a government vaccine brigade of teams that hold people down and insert needles into people. You need a team of a few guys who's going to be resistance when you're trying to hold someone down and stick a needle in them. Chet is kind of a big dude. I don't know if I can do it personally. I might need a team, but like a lot of these people, like they know the facts. They know what the situation is, and they're the same type of people who've always, through their politics, acted selfishly and are now coming on this position where they can be the most selfish person possible because it suits them, and now they're anti-vaxxers. And I don't have much patience for them. I think we got to have some sort of, I know vaccine mandates are a little bit tricky in how they can be implemented, but I think we can warn people from flying, warn people from certain restaurants. I don't think businesses are really taking the lead on this, as you're saying.
I did not lie, by the way. The price was accurate.
I'm $200. I'm pretty much at
mandatory vaccines. I'm pretty much there. Apparently, 2/3 of Americans are on board with that idea anyway. So, in a democratic sense, I actually hold a super majority opinion. I don't know. I think that choosing not to get the vaccine is a violation of the bodily autonomy of other people. You're essentially allowing, like, we don't have. Wait, there's a beeping behind somebody's. Is anyone else hear that?
I hear it's not me.
Yeah, beep.
Yeah, no, I don't want to. It's very distracting.
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Somebody has a beep. That's okay. I don't have. Anyway, yeah, we don't have many like ethical analogs to this because usually when we're talking about bodily autonomy, we're only referring to things done to the individual itself. But because of the way the COVID spreads and the new variants have been formed, which could potentially supersede the effectiveness of existing vaccines, this is kind of a everyone needs to get the vote situation. We're getting a little bit past these worn out, like, let me do what I want, sort of pseudo-libertarian arguments from, by the way, a man who, I don't know if he's going to be most positive this is the case, probably is pro-Blue Lives Matter anti-vaccine. So the libertarianism, I'm guessing, probably pretty selective on his part, and a little bit of analysis. Yeah, always is.
As libertarians are never libertarians.
It's a conspiracism thing, and we've been dealing with this for a while, but right now we have an entire political party and the media empire that aligns with them that are facilitating and nurturing this conspiracism about as much as we reasonably can. So we're going to have to find a way to deal with that sometime.
Yeah, and I'm kind of on board with the mandatory vaccines, and a minimum vaccine passports should not be controversial. But this is what we're dealing with. I just want to give people a sense of the petulance that we're dealing with. So a sociologist from Dartmouth College says that vax resistors could be tricked into getting the shot if they think it would make liberals mad. This is where we're at, folks. This is where you have to convince them to take a shot to save their lives, to own the lives. How do you deal with this?
Literal baby brain. Literal instant brain. Like, yeah.
I had a great idea. Don't be a cuck. Get stuck. There you go. You gotta come up with that. Yeah, you gotta make it seem like you don't get your vaccine. It's because you're afraid of getting germs, and that means you're excited.
Well, just say the vaccine side effect is that it inoculates you against the increases of estrogen and soy to be put in there. And they'll take it like that. They'll be like, oh, I was getting worried. Take that shot.
Well, and also, to that note, COVID-19 has affected some men when it comes to erectile dysfunction as well. So if you don't want your dick to break, then vaccinate yourself so you don't get COVID. And another thing, so this is what I've been doing. So I really hold back a lot because I just want to scream at anti-vaxxers. And there's thankfully no one left in my family who I believe is anti-vax. So I'm moving on to the rest of the people in society.
Gotta catch them all.
Gotta catch them all, 100%, baby. So this is what I try to share, right? Because these are the stories that I think are going to move people that are still livable. So unvaxxed COVID patient posts videos from ICU begging people to get the shot. How many times have we seen this same story? But right-wing radio hosts dying, saying they're going to be, if they survive, they'll be the biggest pro-vax people in the world. I'm not sure if the video is going to play. It wasn't playing earlier, but I just want to play a little bit of this. Okay, yeah, it's not working. But, I think that as much as we can use whatever tactics possible, I think we should go for it. Scaring people, making life very, very uncomfortable if you are not vaccinated, so you can't go to the store. Because I'm sorry, like as Sam was saying, if you're under 12, you're not eligible to get the vaccine yet. So, this is no longer just the personal choice, as Josh was alluding to as well. You are endangering other people actively so, and your freedom ends where your neighbor's fist or nose begins. I just fucked up that statement, but people know what I was talking about. Fill in the blanks. Yeah.
There's so much about this. God, I spent so much time covering and thinking about COVID over the last year, and it's it's so tough because on one hand, I do agree that the scaring route seems to work pretty well. I just had a conversation with a relative the other day. We haven't spoken in a while because we had been falling out about anti-vax stuff. This is literally one of my family members I still talk to, and they got into this anti-vax, anti-masking thing, and then their friend almost died. And the their friend dying, who was a mutual, like a friend of our family. Like I know this person. Like they're disabled now. They have long COVID. Like, and seeing that made them change. You know, my family member changed their position on it, which, like, that's the unfortunate reality of like all of this. Is like a lot of times it is that takes it. I don't know about like how I feel about things like the vaccine mandates. Not because of any sort of like personal like freedom argument or anything like that, but because I worry what that's going to mean from the government's perspective. Something that has really frustrated me about our government's COVID response has basically been that all of the policy has been made not around keeping people well and people not dying. I mean, we have 650,000 dead now, somewhere in that ballpark, which is a lot of Americans dead. But it's always been about, well, how do we do the thing to get people back to work? And so my fear is that you end up with a bold path forward of mandating vaccines, and also that everybody goes back to work and all the benefits. So everybody has to get the vaccine, and you use working and finance and needs testing to push the economy back open and therefore force everybody in under the name of ultimately like, hey, yeah, you're getting vaccinated. But we're at a point where that's not just the vaccine isn't just the issue. The Delta variant is already here. A lot of new cases are Delta variant. We're most likely, it is just simply true, we're probably going to get another variant. If they pass a vaccine mandate, then it is going to theorize or believe where it's a vaccine mandate to push people into going and getting back into work and whatever. I'm worried that's just going to lead us to a position where we naively recreate the exact circumstances that led to where we are right now by pushing people back into their workplaces, back into their, into their restaurants and their Best Buys and their everything like that. And then we just get another variant and we do it all over again. I think that's like a horror situation. So I don't know. I don't know if the vaccine mandate is like the answer, but there's got to be, like, I honestly, like, I find that COVID at this point to be such a hard uphill battle that it is one of the topics that I find hard. Like, I think that, like, a lot of what I focus on is, like, how do we alleviate it, like, in the lives of people around me? Because the policy level is just chaos right now. So chaotic.
Yeah, it's one of the issues for me that's really driving my humorism, at least like personally speaking, because it kind of feels like it's going to be in this perpetual state of plague, because there's so many people who are willingly choosing to not take the vaccine. So I'll go back to like what Lance said about like using everything, a variety of tactics. I think we should definitely do that when it comes to vaccines. At the extent to which, oh yeah,
I agree with that. I have two examples that I can give all y'all, and they both happen to involve the French, so prepare yourselves. But in the case of both Macron in France and Quebec as well, what they did is they started implementing vaccine passport systems, whereas you would be required to use a passport to be able to get into things such as, say, a nice, good old sweaty nightclub to put your sweat on. If that was the case, all of a sudden you saw in both areas, both in Quebec and in France, the amount of people being vaccinated starts to surge. So I don't think it's like, you'll have the anti-vaxxers who will try to say outrageous and outlandish things like, this is apartheid, blah, blah, blah. It's a free vaccine that everyone has access to. I think you have to be sensitive to the fact that there are going to be certain demographics within every society that may not want to take medicines directly from the government for historical reasons, right? Like Black Americans, for example, would have that. So Indigenous Canadians, they would have the exact same reasons. So you can start out with programs to help them, but you would find in the places where they've done this, if you implement some sort of a system where you don't have the right to go into a crowded area and cough on people and give people disease and sweat on people. That's not freedom. That's not your God-given right, So we do have a passport system. The vaccine is free. You can access it at any time. Boom, everybody throws up.
That's interesting to me because, I saw the same thing with mask mandates. So I live in Oregon. Like, there's a lot of us who are coastal elites here. Shout out. But, like, in Oregon, nobody was wearing masks. So I shouldn't say nobody, like maybe 30, 40% of people wearing masks. But, like, overnight, once the mask mandate was implemented, 99% of people at the grocery store were wearing masks. So I think that policy intervention, it does work. Like, you're not going to get 100% of people, as Lance was saying, you're still going to have anti-vaxxers. But I think that you need to cast the widest net possible and, moving towards, like, not just, mandating it legally to the extent that government can, because I don't know that they have, like, the federal government has power to do that. But to the extent that we can, I think that we should at least try to do that. And there is, a precedent with vaccine mandates to go to school.
Yeah, not for essential services, not for just regular things. We're talking about that they were for like, do you want to go into a crowded bar? Do you want to go into a nightclub? Do you want to go into a concert? Things like that. So yes, you probably need to wear.
That's how you really shut hands. The mask mandates are fairly easy legislation because it's really easy to tell the person's wearing a mask. And if you show up and you're not wearing a mask, the person can tell you to leave. And if you don't, they can call the police. Really easy, straightforward, visible. You don't need existing infrastructure. Proving vaccinations is way more difficult. I don't like the vaccine passport stuff that much because unless there was some really rigorous implementation, but the more thoroughly it gets implemented, the more successfully that would need to be something that's fairly easy to understand and to deal with. We all know how bad the average person is at managing any kind of technology, any kind of registry, database, bureaucracy. And I don't want that to magnify any existing social inequality, and I'd like to minimize the number of good, honest, innocent people getting caught up. I think what we need to focus on more than anything else, and this isn't usually my go-to approach, we're all very fun, friendly on my screen, but I think we just need to bully the shit out of people who don't want to get vaccinated. Just like interpersonally, I mean, in a mutual kind of way, not just policy-wise. I think we need to, we need to roll up our sleeves and get back to the good old God-fearing, earnest work of just making them feel like shit, okay? Just imagine, just channel all the energy of a homophobe with gay relatives. I mean, just make them feel awesome about it. And the good part is, if you justify doing so, say, hey, you want to see my family? You got to get the vaccine first, okay? You want to do this with me? No, you're not doing that until you win the vaccine. Oh, wait, you're not using the vaccine? Oh, okay. Curing your illnesses with leeches and lie over there? Just play into them. Because the fact of the matter is, people won't be engaged in this conspiracy bullshit as long as it's socially convenient to them, like flat earth revolving, okay? If you are in an environment that isn't coddled with bullshit, you walk out of it, okay? So, with regards to the anti-vax stuff, just feel okay about making them feel that. And honest to God, I think that's what you will want to do. Because logic is clearly not going to do it. If logic had anything to do with their decision to not be vaccinated, it wouldn't be in this decision, okay? In the absence of logic, all we really have left are how people feel. And I don't know what it's going to make them feel if they're up. They get vaccinated, I'll pay them. Sure, we can pay them 100, 200. I'm fine with that too. We can try that. But we should also.
I do think that I think that there are incentive things like this is where we get to that whole politically possible versus what's gonna actually happen. But I still very firmly believe that if we had just from the get-go taken a large sum of money and put it towards hotels have to be closed because nobody's traveling. So let's have the government buy out blocks of hotels to put people in, like homeless people who don't have a place to stay. Go stay in the hotel. Stay there until the end of the pandemic. Get people off the streets. Pay people to stay home from work. Pay businesses if you have to. Subsidize businesses so that they can stay closed. It would have. It sounds ridiculous to throw that much money in, but we already did that. We already threw money in the wrong direction, and a lot of it. Trump threw a lot of money in the wrong direction, and we're still throwing money now, and we have a ton of dead people. So I feel like the best thing we could do, it would probably be cheaper than even trying to implement passports and this sort of thing, is just pay people to do incentivize them doing the right thing. I do tend to agree about the idea of people tend to they'll get very on board with their Mike Lindell anti-mask vote, Dominion voting, these wild conspiracies. But then when it's okay, but I need you to, and then you get to the call to action, and they're everybody starts sort of mumbling and wandering off in the other direction once the call to action happens. It's true, it is. People are like that. Now, conservatives in America are in a little bit of a unique position with regard to being able to be shamed. So I don't know if just shaming them and making fun of them will work, because they almost seem to get a pleasure out of it. We all know about the war against Christmas, right? They love that. I love the war on Christmas. Happy holidays. It's conservative tradition to feel validated by being victimized by a red cup that says Happy Holidays or whatever. So I feel like they kind of like that, but I think that you can sort of undercut them by calling their bluff and just being like, hey, watch this. If you get a coupon for fucking a beer discount for the next 6 months, if you get your vaccine, go for it. They're gonna like, I'm not telling any of my family. I'm not going out. I'm not gonna go online. I'm not gonna post about it. But I'm getting that fucking coupon. So I feel like we should do things like that. I mean, honestly, like my ideal is I was Joe Biden right now. I would say, convert the hotels, Jack, and have him fucking, really dump a lot of money into this stuff. Food, just make food easy to get. People don't gotta pay anything. Take a ton of government money and make life good for people. They'll stay inside. If they can stay inside, play video games and watch streams and do whatever all day, they'll do it. And the virus will die. It will. We choke it off. But we're not gonna get that. I don't know if we gotta go that far. Maybe we can just do beer coupons or that thing that they did in California with the joint for the jab. Joint. But, nice PS5s. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, there's got to be some stuff like that. And I've not seen almost anything like that.
Yeah, that's.
No, he's got.
No, I was just going to agree with you that it's hard to have this debate and blame individuals, and there is blaming individuals when the government has completely failed to provide an adequate COVID response from the beginning. There was a way to stop the pandemic a year ago, paying people to stay home, freezing the economy. And even today, people are advised, if you get a positive COVID test, quarantine for 2 weeks. Well, how are you going to do that? Like, we don't have places set up like they had in China and in Vietnam and in other places where people can go and be fed and provided for if they end up with positive COVID testing. It's hard to imagine that we'd ever assemble those things here. Although, 100 years ago we had stuff similar with tuberculosis and sanitariums and stuff. But we are not the same sort of society that would do that because there was no profit ever in paying people to stay home and shutting down the economy. We had to make sure the line goes up. And when it comes to vaccinating people, we're all throwing out ideas here because the government really hasn't done much. Here we are at 50% vaccination rate, and we haven't really tried all these other methods to encourage more people to get vaccinated, except on a piecemeal basis, locations at various places. But the government once again really hasn't tried that much. And I do also agree that I don't want to discourage people from ridiculing anti-vaxxers. That's my attack as well, just because that's how I'm personally dealing with this situation. But I do think that they want to fight. That is. They now have anti-vaxxers have a lot of crossover with a lot of other reactionary politics that is now built on confrontation and fighting. They don't have, other than preserving a white majority in the United States and some sort of libertarian government system, beyond that, they just want to fight people because it's a politics of grievance and nihilism.
I totally agree with that. I think it does depend on the fight, because I think there are some fights they really like. If Biden went up on stage and said, "We are declaring war on the unvaccinated," some inflammatory statement, they would love that. They'd run with it for years. But there's something, I think they're much less engaged with the actual consequences of social grievance because they haven't really ever experienced it. When it comes to direct political persecution, the right doesn't actually feel it. Sometimes they do intersectionally. There are poor people who vote Republican, they do that. But for being conservative, the only derision they really ever experience is people being sort of inherently morally put off by the things they believe, And I think that they've always felt deep shame about. When it comes to stuff like the war on Christmas, it feels like they glorify the aesthetic of social conflict, the idea that the media and people are coming after them. But people will always change their behavior often enough when subjected to a lot of interpersonal stress. I think it's an element of the approach. Paying people to get vaccinated seems like to be the most effective. I wonder how only people that are given. Maybe.
I don't know, but I will say though, I do think that there's value, and I want to give credit to because there is value in my opinion in the catharsis the rest of us get from making fun of those people.
Bro.
I think you will. I think I would. If I could make fun of anti-vaxxers, I would have lost my mind already. So that is about the issue.
I can't.
Eating way is self-care.
True though.
What I could say from the made up Fantasyland of Canada is that we've got the highest rates in the world right now. I'm not saying this to flex. I'm saying this to say.
Rub it in, Lance. God.
No. I'm 100% not saying this to flex. I'm saying this. What's the biggest difference between BC and say like Alabama or other parts of the United States? We don't have own networks. We don't have Fox News. We don't have Tucker Carlson. We don't have the 24/7 cycle that all you amazing yanks are pushing up against, right? Because like that's what you all have to do. Like that is your job. And without someone doing that, you get Tucker Carlson on the radio every day saying that it like force feminizes you and cheats you and it inserts the robots into your testicles. All that shit does have an effect. You can see it in the numbers.
Yeah, I think it. Right. I was just going to say, I think you touched on something that is sort of the unique challenge of America in general, right? Is that like America has this such a deeply ingrained conservative media presence. When Rush Limbaugh, thankfully, departed from this world, I had a big stream because I grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh owns America's radio waves, and I mean that in that like it's him. And if you're not listening to him, you're listening to someone who's backed by him, who's been chosen by, but not directly chosen by him, but chosen by him to be that region's Rush Limbaugh. And that's the same thing goes for conservative TV. I don't know. Is there anything that can even be done about that? I don't know how to do that. I mean, I like to think that at least online, like lefties are getting good at SEO. We're getting good at getting our word into face of people who would otherwise only ever hear Fox News. But network news and radio is almost impenetrable. It is almost impossible to get someone to not tune in to Fox News if they're used to just turning on their TV and letting that run. You can't insert yourself there. There's no YouTube recommendations. They control the recommendations. They control that echo chamber. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how we penetrate that. I don't know.
It's functionally daycare for boomers. Like they just sit in front of the TV all day and they are entertained. But
there's also Joe Rogan, right? Who's not traditional conservative media, who has millions of listeners and has been on a kick that young healthy people aren't really in danger of COVID. And I'd say that as much as I've criticized the government's response, and it deserves it, if there's one clear message that the government has put out during this pandemic is that this is a disease that affects older people more than younger people, but younger people can still get sick and pass it on to older people. Like this has been something I feel like everybody should have known by now. There's no sort of excuse unless you're completely consuming all your media from a place that is looking to undermine those facts. And I see someone like Chet Hanks, I feel like that's where he has probably gotten his message, this idea that he doesn't need it, that this is for weak people or whatever. And you see lots of testimonials or interviews, and there was one recently in the Times of a young person who's like, I want to wait for people who need the vaccine more than me. I'm young. I'm not going to get sick. And he lives with his 80-year-old grandma. Like he has no clue almost that he can get her sick when he's being interviewed by the Times. And it's, maybe I'm assuming he's a Rogan listener. I don't know, but like he's probably this guy has influence. And I mean, he's not considered Fox News. Probably a lot of people consider it part of the left media sphere, which I personally say is ridiculous, but or at least part of this alternative anti-establishment media frame that is now spewing a lot of anti-vax stuff.
Yeah. So folks, we're a little more over the halfway point. I want to give the panelists a break, so what we'll do is we'll cut to our featured content creator of the week. When we come back, we will dive further into the rabbit hole of stupidity in the United States. Let me just check it. I didn't know that you were also in Seattle. Are you and Bosch? Are you okay with the heat to go for a little while longer?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've more or less I've adapted to unbearable pressure and heat at this point. Well,
good.
I'm actually going to have to depart at the hour because it's my friend and roommate Heina's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday,
Happy birthday, Heina. That's awesome. Hyenas.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
I got Children's Part 2, and the first time was bad.
Okay. So here's what we'll do. We'll take a quick 2.5 minute break, and then we will dive right back in and get in as much as we can before the hour folks. How does that sound?
Absolutely.
All right.
Sorry, how long is the break?
The break is about 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay. Bye, Bosch. Say happy birthday to Hyena and give her a big hug for me. That's awesome. And bye, Sam. It was very nice to meet you.
Stick around for a half hour. I'll stick around for a half hour.
Retract all my previous statements. I'm just talking to your originals.
All right, don't go yet. Don't
You don't have to stick around later. I'll be right here.
We'll be right back, folks.
I'm gonna grab it.
This is a cute show. Maybe I'll come on here. Maybe from time to time. I just don't like socializing. Hello.
Hi, my name is Amy C3. I'm a leftist housing advocate and independent data journalist, and I stream on Twitch.
Awesome.
I want to talk about my latest project, though. It is a housing news program on YouTube.
Sure. Yeah. Oh my God, we're in the housing zone.
So the show is broken down into 3 categories. I start with the general housing story,
That's called the world
and then
of
move to
grace.
the data portion, where we take a closer look at the data that is tied to that housing story, and then my favorite, which is the ground game portion, and the response by local activists to that issue that was presented in the original housing news story. One of the goals of this program is to inform an audience of people who might be interested in joining the fight and being a part of their community, taking on a role of leadership, joining the DSA meeting, going to a tenant union meeting. And for me, that would be the most rewarding part of this program, is that it did activate people to want to be part of the community movement of empowerment. It's very new and very much a work in progress. So I'm still working on figuring out the format of these videos, but if you're interested in learning more, all episodes are available on YouTube. Housing News with Amy C3. Thank you so much, and I hope you give me a chance.
Base. Wait, what?
Well, folks, if you're watching on YouTube, there will be links in the description box. And if you're watching on News TV, I will try to remember to comment below the episode just a few times. Do you want to jump in, Bob?
Kasi, ako pa yung mas rapid do MotoGP.
Eu tô no Bentegol.
Yes,
I was berating my chat for being very kind to me. I'm here, hello.
Hello, Bosch's chat. Okay, one last thing. So before we move on, I just want to plug this GoFundMe. This is for Carly. She's a member of the human support community. She's one of my mods. I've known her for years, and she needs a little bit of money to cover a surgery. And she needs $1,500. So I'll link to this on YouTube. If you can help out Carly, she'll be eternally grateful. She is an advocate of Medicare for all, but meanwhile, until we get Medicare for all, I feel like these kinds of things, I try to plug them as much as I possibly can. But Carly is a really, really great person, phenomenal progressive and leftist. And if you can help her out, I will be eternally grateful. So please check out Carly's GoFundMe along with ABC3's channel. So before the break, I said we were going to dive a little bit deeper into the stupidity of American politics. And just to give you a little bit of a precursor, the conservative movement has been fixated on Mr. Potato Head, Cat in the Hat, and lately they've taken a liking to the Muppets. Now, I hope that this doesn't get me copyright claims, because he's going to play a clip of the Muppets. But we're going to watch the Muppets, folks. I'm sure that some of us grew up with it, and see what all of the noise is about with regard to conservatives and why they're outraged here.
Away from the transgender issue, right? It's everywhere, even though transgender issues, well, really affects a very small number of people. But it seems like they want it to affect a lot more, especially our children. Meet Gonzo. Gonzo is a Muppet.
I just gotta pause there real quick. He's trying to create this ominous image, and then he cuts to this beautiful, bright picture of the Muppets. And I love everything that's happening right here.
Or one of these characters, Disney characters. I didn't know Gonzo was a kid, but Gonzo's big. And, well, Gonzo had a secret for Gonzo's friends.
Let me pause it right there before he goes on his rant. We can already anticipate what he's going to say, but is that not the most wholesome, wonderful thing you've ever seen? Like, how could you not love that?
Yeah, incredibly. I just want to add this before any discourse takes place, that Gonzo has been, like, basically canonically non-binary since the 1970s. You can actually find episode segments of it wearing a dress with, like, the hand Muppets, I mean, way back decades before I was born. So this is, seriously, multiple times, multiple episodes. This is completely, this is, you know what? This is canon.
Very base.
Yeah.
Gonzo is a species of alien that doesn't have gender.
Okay, so you can already anticipate what is going to be said here. We'll also cut to one of my favorite political commentators on the right who's going to also weigh in here. But let's let him tell you why he's deeply offended.
So, apologies, Gonzo. I'm sorry. Why is this being pushed? I don't know if Gonzo is a cross-dresser or transgender, but if Gonzo is transgender, that is a disorder. Gender dysphoria is a disorder.
It's an alien.
Actually so. All right? So Muppet between their gender
Alien
sex.
cartoon.
Okay, so before we discuss this, that is not all. So Candace Owens actually reacted to this, saying, I can't believe I'm tweeting this, but they are pushing the trans agenda on children via Muppet babies. This is sick and perverted in all caps. Everyone should be disturbed by predatory cartoons meant to usher children into gender dysphoria. Bring back manly Muppets, anyone. Folks, what is happening on the right? What is happening on the right? I'll just leave this open to the panel because this makes me want to show myself.
We're all thinking of the Swedish Chef, right? Like she's got to be talking about the Swedish Chef. That's the only one that comes to mind.
Cross-dress 80 years ago? What is that? I was just saying that, like, first of all, they act like this is this trans issue when, no, it's not. There are stories of people dressing up for comedic effect or because they enjoy doing so for literal centuries. Does anyone remember Avatar: The Last Airbender? If you haven't seen it, you should see it. Sokka dresses up as a Kyoshi warrior in episode, like, 5, makeup and everything. But back then, there wasn't this obsession with using every instance of a guy or whatever wearing a dress as part of the culture war battle against trans people, so it went largely uncommented on. But if it came out today, you would know people would be screeching about Nickelodeon pushing transgenderism on the youth.
Go woke, go broke, go woke, go broke.
And to really speak to how much things have changed, like I'm wearing a Zelda shirt. In Breath of the Wild, there's this part of the game where Link has to dress up in women's clothing to get into some area. And
I've seen drawings of those segments.
Listen, right? And I don't remember. We can dive into the Legend of Zelda lore, but I mean, I don't remember it being controversial even back then. I mean, maybe I saw an article about it, praising it or something, but now conservatives are hypersensitive to where they're fixated on these weird, culture war issues that don't even make sense, the cancellations of Mr. Potato Head and Cat in the Hat, when these weren't actually cancellations. Please do.
Why they don't care about Legend of Zelda or anything that is done today. There's so many examples of things they could get mad about that are way woker and way more trans agenda as the representative of demonic transes who are undermining the world here. It's that old people recognize Muppets and old people recognize Mrs. Butterworth and old people recognize Uncle Ben and old people recognize Dr. Seuss, but they don't know what
their toys.
They're like,
their
a
generation's
link
toys.
in a chain.
Yeah.
It's that's a great.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
That's very
Yeah.
true.
It's that, and I don't know. It does seem to be that they get most mad about things that old people would recognize, which to me plays into that whole idea of the Newsmax and Fox News being boomer daycare, right? Like,
Yeah, look, there's images of Gonzo in a dress that like a million years ago. I think it was drawn on animation subs. It's completely toothless. I don't even know if they believe any of this stuff when they say it. Like, I haven't heard. When are we gonna get the cancellation of Bugs Bunny? That guy cross-dressed all the time. He kissed men all the time.
What?
You know
that's true. Oh yeah, that's true.
The voice in the act.
I've seen it.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like,
I didn't know this about Bugs Bunny.
on ITV.
That's what, maybe that turned me gay. Is that possible? Like, I remember seeing Bugs Bunny kiss men.
Yeah. Also, I want to know how the logic of this works, because I think you can make people trans by showing kids trans people. The kids are shown cis people pretty much all the time. Every human who has ever lived is constantly being shown cis people. So does it only go one way?
It's just sexuality in everything, everywhere. Like every single cartoon that you grow up with, it's like, oh yes, muscles, He-Man, and now here we go, it's gonna be amazing. Like, the thing is, things are very subtly cheap.
I have never seen an instance of a masculine character being feminized in what I thought was a cynical attempt to promote like an affinity for trans people. I don't think I've ever actually seen that once. With all the cynical woke shit that comes out to appeal to millennials, I don't think I've ever seen that. Does anyone have any? Like, does anyone think of that happening?
But no, I mean that's the thing. Like, if you want to look at examples of like trans representation and like stuff like that in film and pop culture, it's like overwhelmingly negative. Like, you just get to like the Ace Ventura, like the most extreme examples of just truly, like, I don't know, like going back and watching like Ace Ventura.
Silence of the Lambs.
So bad, yeah, Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, Ace Ventura is really bad, yeah.
Yeah.
Really bad.
I rewatched that one a couple of years ago, and I was like, whoa!
Yeah. It just keeps going.
It just keeps going. And so, yeah, like, it doesn't make sense. No, go ahead.
We got a blog though. If anyone's been following One Piece for the past 100 years, where we actually have, I think, 2 trans characters who are treated well and beloved in the current arc.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow.
You have Yamato, and you have what's the name of that 9-foot tall lady? Is it 3? Oh, anyway, I don't know. But
Okay,
you read One Piece? I don't know.
I follow a couple of conservative commentators who I think are particularly fun to watch on this particular topic. Candace Owens is always a classic, of course, but my personal favorite is Matt Walsh, and that's because Matt Walsh will lose his absolute mind over the smallest thing, and I mean truly. Like, he read a book once on stream, on his little stream that he does, and it was like, and he just read through this book, and it was literally a book that was just like, this is Carla. She was assigned male at birth by her parents, but later on realized that she was a girl, and he was like, this is perversion. This is how this is like, I'm not kidding you. He's losing his mind, like, being obviously, like, truly angry. And I'm like, what are you even mad about? And he does this to anything. And so it's the hysteria around this like trans. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Look, I'm Demon Mama, so like I don't mind being feared a little bit. Okay, like let's be real. I like that a little, but it's kind of to an unbelievable degree, and you can't see it. It's everywhere. Last night I got on Twitter. I'm like, oh god, why is the word trans trending on Twitter? And I was like. And I'm like, oh god, every single time it gives me a small heart attack because I'm like, yeah, what is it now? Is it going to be like some other just unbelievable, like, just, you would think that trans people were orcs if you listen to just
your motto.
It's beyond parody. The amount of misstep between like reality and their idea of reality, and I mean it really does parallel like calling Joe Biden a Chinese communist. But see, on that one, only Alex Jones will say that. Whereas with trans people, like any conservative online will have a meltdown about just seeing that a trans person exists, and they're like, "That's child abuse." I'm like, right, because somebody else that you don't like exists. Like, I don't know. It's a level of fear and derangement that it is genuinely concerning.
And derangement is the perfect word, because it's like this obsession, and part of it is they're trying to use trans people as, this political football, because this is like, they can win over the most people by trans Americans. It's disgusting. But speaking of derangement, the last thing that I want to talk about before we close the show, we'll try to exit before the top of the hour, so everyone leaves at the same time. It's Mark Gallery, and I'm very, very thankful that we have a communist on the panel, and Sam, to react to her definition of not just communism, but what she calls corporate communism.
Corporations on military-industrial complex is a major issue. So I have a term for that. I call it corporate communism. Corporate communism destroys small businesses in America, and I have a very good example from my district. They destroy the small businesses, and the corporations gain all the control, and they can't be defeated. And they keep the bidding of the government like they're doing by saying, "Oh, the government's not going to mandate vaccines." But the big corporations are getting corporate communism. They're putting the policy in place through their businesses on their employees and on their customers, like we've seen with the airlines.
That's capitalism.
Yeah, that's the point. That's capitalism. I mean, it's a sign that we're winning some sort of ideological war, that they take all the terrible things about capitalism and just try to call it communist. They at least recognize that it's an unsustainable system here. I used to get frustrated when Bernie did similar stuff when he talked about corporate socialism and versus. And I guess I know that there is kind of a history, like Martin Luther King used similar terminology, but it mystifies. We don't need to. We can point out all these things that capitalism is doing and define it as capitalism because they're deeply unpopular and nobody likes them. By trying to redefine socialism in a way, you just end up helping the right and end up helping Marjorie Taylor Greene talking points down the road. I don't know how to respond to something like that other than the way you guys do. It's just describing capitalism. But
at this point, we've long since reached the singularity where none of these words mean anything in the communist course, especially right? I mean, the use of the words fascism, communism, and socialism amongst secrecy at a meeting and have been reduced completely and entirely to complete identified. I don't know if you can ever be pulled back from that point. It's just like if a person's 32 years old and they vote red and they think that communism, socialism, and fascism are all when corporations allow vaccine requirements in their stores. Like, what could you ever do to reestablish the meaning of those terms that person's had? I think it's almost like you have to abandon them, and we need to come up with a new term to describe all this.
That's why I think that, like, a lot of the time, this is one of the things that I like. I think that there's a lot of, I don't want to say time wasted on trying to win over right-wing people, but, like, I think that, like, most of the time, aiming for everyone who's not already an adherent of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz is usually because it is, and I want people to understand that it is almost impossible to fish someone back from a position where they think that, like, where you're talking about, where the words are so diluted that they don't even have the same, they're not even speaking the same language. They say communism, and that equals in their brain what Joe Biden does when he orders, an extra egg on the taxpayer's dime. Like, that's what they literally mean, and they take that on that's not the dictionary definition of communism or socialism or anything or welfare. Like, I mean, when they think of welfare, like when I think of welfare, I think of an arduous, obnoxious process to get pocket change from the government so that you can have food in the middle of a pandemic where you have to fill out 50 pages of paperwork in order to even do that.
And don't forget, by the way, this is the person who went to learn that the Holocaust was bad. I go, oh possible to see him. So maybe, I don't know, if she went to like Marxist Grave, she could learn some things about theory. Maybe in term, if she wants to keep labeling everything as way more badass than it is, like I don't understand, because every day I'm hearing about Joe Biden is this radical communist, neo-Marxist superstar, the child of angles and all this kind of stuff. Like, where does that leave us? Where does that leave the left? All these words I don't need anymore.
I will say it does give us one small advantage, which is that when people get to that level of having their own entire lexicon, that's totally different from everybody else. It's incredibly alienating. And so, like, obviously, the people who are in are very hard to get out. This is like cults, right? Like, it's like, once they're in, it's really, really hard to get out. It's damn near impossible, and they rely on that. They fish people in, they get stuck forever, and they slowly and surely accumulate. But this applies on a bigger level. Like, if we as, like, the online left, or as all, like, general left in America, can instill a sense of just like incredulity towards this sort of nonsense, which I do think that there's been success at. By the way, I think that, like, especially in streaming spaces, like, people laugh about the, like, Joe Biden being a Chinese communist or being a socialist now. That's good that people laugh at that. I think that's a funny thing. I think that's how you inoculate people from ever getting pulled in the first place. And I think it's a much harder project to try and matter. And personally, I don't even know that this is something that, like, online content creators can even meaningfully participate in outside of just sort of chance, because like whether you get people out of that far right of a thing over the internet alone, I don't know that that's possible. But we can certainly inoculate a lot of people to this idea that, like, that rant should be taken seriously at all. And if people watch that and they think, oh my God, why is the scary looking lady and the scary looking man telling me that Walmart is a corporate communist, and then they just laugh and turn their brains off because it just seems like absurd morbid. And if that impression, I think that's going to be really effective at making their message fall on deaf ears.
I was just wondering where the whistle guy was. Where the whistle guy being elastic, those two were at.
That was so good. I love everything about it.
Oi? Oi. Tudo. Eu não tenho pé nenhum, acho eu. Não sei se trouxe ou se no castelo, vou ver. Mas deve ter aqui algum. Médio, eu tento ver assim. Médio, manda um vídeo, vou ver se tem algum. Uhum. Sim, mas a outra. Bem, a gente agora também já sabe usar a outra. Na altura não tínhamos usado nenhuma delas. Tenho que procurar, eu não sei muito qual. Eu devo ter aqui algumas, tenho que procurar. Eu vou ver se acho. Ok. Ok, peraí, vou tentar aqui. Está 32 minutos, não é? Ok. Eu já vou ver isso agora, estou a pintar tênis inicial contigo. Sim, deixa. Eu sei. Certo, deixa-me ver o que é à venda, que números e de onde, enquanto eu ver que moro. Tá. Até já.
Oh, that was so good. Okay, so we talked about doomerism for a good portion of this podcast, but I'm actually going to end on a positive note. So we just watched Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I just want you to know, if you're watching this and you think that you're not worthy enough, or you're going to take a test and you just don't think you can do it, or you're applying for a job and you don't think that you're qualified, if Marjorie Taylor Greene can be elected to Congress, you can do anything. So just keep that in mind. So, having he might be a better example, to be fair. He might be a better example. Okay, so folks, we are at the end of the show. I want to leave a couple of minutes so all of our panelists can plug their projects, give any shout outs to something that they're doing. Yeah, Sam, we'll start with you.
Well, people can catch me on Means TV doing Means Morning News. We're moving this summer, the process of moving to Sunday. That's going to premiere at the end of the month. Means.tv, subscribe, pay what you can afford, and get a lot of good stuff, including my show on there. And I also do a podcast, District 7 Radio, on Fridays. Patreon if you're interested in that.
Yeah, and this show will be on Means TV as well, so be sure to check it out. I'm also providing you with links in the chat if you're watching this on YouTube. Lex, where we can find you and what you have in store for people.
For people, I do political stuff on the interwebs, and you can find me at serfs.tv, which is the website, theserfs.tv. Also, working for about 3 months on a Gamergate documentary that I'm really excited. It's coming out very shortly. And next week we'll have a collab with Aiden Animations. That's the super genius who did that recent Steve Crowder prolific, amazing, horrifying, incredible piece of work. So you know what? Don't go follow me. Go follow Aiden Animations. Go check out Aiden Animations on YouTube. It's fucking so amazing.
Yeah, shout out to Aiden. That was an amazing video. I literally binged every single video on his YouTube channel. Great work. Okay, thank you, Lance. Vosh.
My name is Vouch. I'm a Bloodborne streamer, a professional first-person game Bloodborne. Waiting on Elden Ring right now.
Yes.
It's gonna be a lot of fun when it comes out. There's a brain called Redheaded Lady. We're all gonna sit over that when we get there. And you can find me over at Vouch on YouTube.
All right, and Demon Mama.
Yeah, Demon Mama, my website is like right here. It's here. DemonMama.com. You go to DemonMama.com. All of my links are there. I put out banger tweets on Twitter, so you should follow me on Twitter because I'm really fun. I mostly meme and dream, which is cool. And then you can hang out with great man. So and then you should come over and follow my YouTube channel. I have a ton of videos that I put up on my YouTube channel. There's some super cool ones. For example, I did a video called Demon Mama's Spiritual Deconstruction, which is like a 2-hour long-form story about the cult that I grew up in and my experiences and how that affected my politics. So check that out if you want to learn about my experiences, where I'm coming from with that. I also have a lot of really fun stuff on my channel as well that is about stuff like that. Please come check me out. I'd love to have you hang out on the website and stuff. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much. This has been so much fun. You all are incredibly entertaining and insightful, and I really appreciate everything that you all brought individually. Thank you all so much. So we're going to cut to the outro, and then I'll come back, read comments, super chats, and all that fun stuff. Folks, thank you so much. This has been the Dystopian Times. My name is Mike Figueredo. I'll see you all next week.
Take care.
Bye.
Let's go.
One in 7 children does not have enough food to lead a healthy and active life. But what does it take to end global hunger? It costs 80 cents to feed one hungry child for one full day. The Share the Meal app enables you to share your meal with children in need. All it takes is 80 cents and a tap on your smartphone whenever you want, wherever you are. The United Nations World Food Program provides the meals. Let me show you where the children are.
a Michael Knowles video. I like going over Michael Knowles videos, you know. He's got a nice energy. Hey, let's see what's going on with Michael Knowles right now, you know. Well, what have we got? Anti-white racism from the Democrat darling Ilhan Omar. And the thumbnail is her saying, white people. See, it's just, okay. Something about Hunter Biden's laptop, which I cannot believe people are still on this. Let's see. Black woman fakes sob story on CNN for money. Interesting. Curious. Fascinating even. What they got going on today? Bible. White House video is too painful to watch. I saw this on Twitter. It's only 4 minutes long. I'm here for it. Let's go. Michael! What's up, Michael?
But it's not the most confusing messaging that the White House has put out this week. Because they have relied once again on a social media influencer. This one, I had never heard of them before. I sort of hope I never hear of them again, but I did watch this video so that you don't have to, delve through all the piles and piles of horrific viral videos. I watched this.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you. I appreciate that.
This is from Any Drama. He played the role of a White House intern, filmed it in the White House with members of the White House staff, including Jen Psaki, to convince all the unvaccinated people to go get the vaccines. Cool.
One time, democracy's calling.
I skipped right ahead and listened to Day of My Life having a White House intern.
Really quick, since I am a white gay, I have the power to make fun of this. This person's gay, right? I mean, I'd be pretty surprised if. Okay. No, I know. I'm just making sure.
Hey, everyone.
Sorry, I'm really strict.
It's culturally gay, not sexually gay. Alright, I don't care about this anymore. Basically, it's just a cringe TikTok where he's like gay in the White House. What's up, Michael?
I don't even know exactly what I just watched.
That's what being gay is like.
You're supposed to be funny or persuasive. But I do know this. According to the Democratic Party, people who are not getting vaccinated are conservative, right-wing, Christian, Bible-thumping.
Everything that he's saying right now so far is provably true.
Republicans in the red states, right? That's what we're told from the liberal establishment.
No, that is literally true, based on all available information. That's not, liberals will tell you that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. That is the narrative that we've been getting from Joe Biden's administration.
It turns out a group of people least likely to be getting vaccinated are actually Black Americans, who I think their vaccination rates right now are like 28% or something like that.
I don't think it's at 28%. Yeah, Black Americans are pretty low on their vaccination rate, but that doesn't change any of the other things. Wait, why is he like? We're not getting vaccinated, but Black people aren't either. What is that? Hold on. Vaccination rate, Black Americans. It also depends on where the Black Americans are, because as I understand it, Black Americans in blue states and big cities are generally pretty vaccinated. But Black Americans in like the Bible Belt or in rural southern areas are much less likely to be vaccinated. Isn't that correct? That like there's a heavy like urban rural divide in terms of the relative levels of vaccination. Latest data published August 4. 70% of the adult population are receiving at least one vaccination. People who have received at least one dose. Well, this isn't relevant unless you proportion it to the actual size of the ethnic groups in this. Do these not account for like population size? Scroll to table 3. That sounds like a lot of work. It should not be difficult to simply get a percentage of how many black people in America are vaccinated. Oh my God. I don't care. I just wanted, it's literally a simple figure that I wanted to look up. I don't care. You know what? Let's just say it's super fun.
Black Americans overwhelmingly vote for the Democratic Party, but because the Democrats don't want to acknowledge that it's actually a large labor of their own voters that are not getting vaccinated, they try to blame it on conservative.
Wait, haven't they? Haven't there been pushes with the Democratic Party to specifically do outreach to like black Democrats in order to get them vaccinated as well? This seems like a pretty weak attempt at whataboutism. Also, what's this happening with the gay TikTok?
Sure, right-wing Republicans in the red states, many of them also don't want to get vaccinated either. And the White House decided that the best way to persuade conservative, right-wing, Christian, Bible-thumping voters in the red states and black voters as well is with an officiously, flamboyantly gay, gender-bending, Zoomer or millennial TikTok influencer.
Wait, I don't think this was the White House's strategy to appeal to all those groups of people. I think this is just a thing that happened. I'm guessing that this guy was an influencer and he probably just got like the permission of some lower level White House staff to do some like filming there, and he just had to get the footage like signed off on to make sure there was nothing like bad in it, and that's it. Like I don't think Biden was in the war room, you know, with his with all of his officials, you know, and he's like, we gotta find a way to get the red states and the Bible thumpers and the bunnies and blacks vaccinated. What do? And some like 4-star general was like, shit, I can't remember. Darn, we need a TikTok. Oh, so yeah, Michael knows if you want to, you can just say the F slur, okay? I won't be mad. He's literally the socket there? Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean that she like was the one who ordered it, orchestrated it. I don't think she's the one who signs off on that sort of thing. I don't know. I'm just saying it's probably not like the Biden administration strategy, you know? I don't know if the press secretary has much authority on that kind of thing.
That's what's going to do it, right? That nothing those Bible thumpers or those sort of vaccine hesitant Black Americans love more. Quite famously, historically, nothing they don't love.
Wait, is his only statement on the wait, I thought he was going to be more like homophobic. Is all he has to say on this is that this Zoomer gay TikTok isn't going to convince conservatives to get vaccinated?
That very, very officiously, sexually revolutionary, gender-bending white liberals, right? But no, of course not. Of course not. The video won't persuade anybody. And it doesn't matter. They don't care because the White House doesn't actually need to persuade anybody.
It's just a TikTok. My guy, it's just a TikTok. It's just a TikTok. That's it. Also, hey, maybe it's to shore up the 8% of LGBTQ adults who haven't gotten at least one COVID shot. Weird people are rocking the house right now. You gays are getting vaxxed the fuck up because you're all on Tinder and you want to suck dick. You want to get vaccinated first. They even got little vaccinated like stickers you can put on your profile on Tinder, or I don't know if they did it in Grindr too, but on Tinder to show you're vaccinated, you know?
The entire thing's about scoring political points, and none of them were actually that worried. Because if they were that worried, they would actually put someone on the video that might be able to persuade either the right-wing evangelicals or the black voters in the cities, but they don't because it's not a big deal.
But they've been doing outreach on a national and state level for like months. It's literally like one random TikTok. You can tell Biden doesn't actually care about COVID because this one TikTok that came out of the White House doesn't single-handedly address every single demographic that might have a what's he talking about? Michael, you can do better than this. Cut segment, we'll do another. Stop.
Andamos na boca do mundo, região de Lima, região europeia da gastronomia. A Million Food Stories.
No, actually, keep the segment. We're still on the gays. Lol. Straight sex is just, quote, breeding kink. First of all, true. Straight people are degenerate kinksters, and something needs to be done.
One more creepy viral TikTok video. These sex scandals seem very strange today because we've all gotten used to all sorts of sexual scandals that aren't even scandalous anymore. There's a TikTok that went viral of some person on the left describing regular old heterosexuality, just a man and woman love each other very much, and have babies as a breeding kink.
Well, I'm super straight.
Really quick, how many likes does this TikTok have? I noticed that the apparatus which shows us how relevant this is. There are people in chat saying 1.4K. That's pretty specific. Is that true? I don't know.
Only attracted to women who can bury children. Dave, that's called a breeding kink.
True.
And it's not a sexuality.
So
it's literally that. It's like 6 seconds, dude. How triggered are you? Oh my god. You guys make fun of gay people all the time, and it's a joke about super straights and how they have a breeding kink to only want to be with people who are fertile. It's so obviously a joke. How mad it has 100K likes? Good. I thought it would be bad. I think it's funny.
breeding kink is this individual is making fun of people who hold a traditional sexual method, who think that.
Again, when you're referring to being super straight as a traditional sexual ethic, you deserve to be made fun of. I'm sorry, you're easy to make fun of, and you deserve it. Okay.
In the words of the great philosopher Norm Macdonald, sex is a filthy, shameful thing that obviously is only meant for procreation, and that you should maybe get married before you have sex, and then
you should make fun of people like this. This is worthy of ridicule.
When you have sex, you should be open to the possibility of life, have children, have a really good life. And what this person is saying is, no, it's a breeding kink. Some people have a kink for whips.
I just want to say, by the way, all jokes aside, this stuff that he just quickly rattled off in an attempt, like, sex is disgusting and should only be reserved for procreation. How is that not also offensive? I just have to say, but like, is it not also kind of impugning heterosexuality to suggest that heterosexual sex is disgusting unless it's being done for procreation? Like, I'm just saying, it was a joke about, well, so was the person who made the TikTok. So do jokes matter in this universe, or do they not? I don't know.
In chains, some people have a kink for threesomes, and some people have a kink for breeding. But it's all just kinks, right? It's all just kind of weird quirks of sex. And what that implies is that there's no standard. What that implies is that no sort of sexual behavior is any better or worse than any other sort of sexual behavior.
Like I said, it is okay to make fun of these people.
right? It's all just relative to which we do want. It's all about your desires. And this creates a problem.
I'm sorry, hold on. It's my sex, and whoever else I'm having sex with, who other than our desires should I be concerned with here? Wait, hold on. Jesus? Yeah, no shit. He's like, drawing with colored pencils and crayons. Well, all right. I suppose you think that drawing is only about fun, or what do you mean? What? This is literally the, isn't there someone you forgot to ask me?
I wanted to meet you, Aaron, because your sexual standards will come in, they will be enforced in some way, and so now people have to explain why certain sort of ugly sexual encounters are fine, but the exact same sorts of sexual encounters when they're undertaken by different people or in different circumstances are not fine.
I don't know what the fuck he's talking about, but I'm going to take a wild leap here and assume that he's like downplaying sexual harassment. I'm just going to assume this is some kind of rape apology.
And it's a very, very confusing people that when they're totally liberated, they ought to be able to relate to sex in exactly the same way as men, but then when women have to regret sex, as in the case of high-profile cases like Marilyn Manson or other partners and lovers of these.
Yeah, he's doing the rape accusations are actually when women enjoy sex, but later they regret it. Yeah, how am I always right? How did I call it?
He's furious, and they say, well, yes, it was consensual, but he still abused me, and I didn't like it, and women are different, but they're not different. It's all very confusing because we don't.
Notice how he's not specifically referring to anything because his point is completely incomprehensible, and he's just vaguely gesturing at the insecurities of guys who fear every day that they'll be hit with a false rape accusation. Keep in mind, false rape accusations happen about as often as false accusations of any other kind. False accusations of murder, false accusations of harassment, false accusations of all other kinds. Rape is in about the same frequency of false accusation as the others.
Have any sort of standard. I'm glad you like that.
Nice! Is he saying rape doesn't exist? He's saying rape exists when Democrats are accused of it, but not when Republicans are accused of it. Trans dudes knock up women in prison. I assume he means trans women. I'm just gonna guess. That's the thing that he actually means. Right? Race award features child and dominated men. Can't get more in discourse. Not again. How much of your content is just pointing out people vaguely gesturing at imaginary bad stuff? Well, if conservatives had better arguments, I would have more to respond to. Unfortunately, they don't, so I can't. Great people are degenerate hipsters, and something needs to be done.
At some point when one of these people in the stick thread yesterday just asked if they were ethno-nationalists believe the JQ, and they were just like, yep, mask off moment. It's so funny how Sticks in that Twitter thread accuses me of being a Nazi. Me, who you all know well enough to know that that's a funny statement. And meanwhile, literally in the same threads, his fans were sending me Nazi shit, Nazi rhetoric, and, ethno-nationalist stuff. He's projecting. Oh, I know he is. I know what he's doing. It's just really funny how blatant it is. Anyway, what's JQ Jewish question? Nazi stuff, basically anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. I don't tell low enough before it looks like they're on my head. Okay, I'll be real with you guys. I'm really hot and sweaty. So normally I put on the tinfoil stuff for this, especially because we got to level 5 of the hype train. Not doing this day. I'm already super hot and dehydrated. That's not good for me. I think most of you will understand that. I'll make sure next week for tinfoil Tuesday I'm in better shape.
So let us do what we're going to do. We're going to use this advanced so I can shut it off. So, for the moment, what I have to do on this issue. Each one says, good luck, we're going to be the same coat. We're going to be the same coat. Why is everyone saying Dancy? Why are you expecting Dancy for some reason? Make a tinfoil fan for toasty eggs? Make a tinfoil fan for toast. Oh, I got it. Fan. That's actually not a bad idea. Little house fancy. Okay, let's get to it. Some of those we don't know, Mike Pillow, aka Mike Label, as is known by the channel pseudonym. Mike Pillow, which is his real legal name, for definitely sure. Actually, you know what? I'll take my gavel. This is too short. So Mike Lindell, who is an election conspiracy theorist who believes that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. It wasn't. Has been doing all sorts of weird grips lately, and of course, one of our favorite conspiracy theorists for tinfoil Tuesday, Peter, is a big fan of Mike Pillow and believes that everything Mike Pillow says is true because he's trustworthy, because he's Mike Lindell, and Mike Lindell is trustworthy because he tells the truth and he knows the truth because he's trustworthy. That makes sense. So anyway, Mike decided to hold a 72-hour, 3-day, quote, cyber symposium in which he provided what he claimed was election data for people to come and sift through in order to try. See, normally you would think you were a rational person, because obviously the onus would be on the person who claimed that there was fraud and there wasn't, considering there's been no evidence of fraud, right? So the onus you think would be on him and the people he's approaching to say, find me evidence that there was fraud. But that's not actually what he ended up doing. Instead, he decided, I will give you $5 million if you can prove there wasn't fraud. Proving a negative is basically impossible when you haven't even provided evidence to your claims. But fine. Whatever. So, he had a 3-day cyber symposium. It was a shit show. It was hilarious. Throughout me moving and doing stuff, whenever I sat down, I would take a look at the live threads of people watching it and making fun of it. And every time there was a new stupid thing that was happening. So I thought for today's stream would be fun, going through some of these clips, the highlights, the low lights, all the lights, and just have fun. It's going to be kind of a chill stream today. Just going to make fun of this. And Peter has a video for later too. Freakout99 says, to be honest, this is going to be just as, if not more awkward than E3. You know what? I'll watch the latest Just Dance advertisement in E3 before I watch this again. Kenny Sume says, there was fraud though. It was almost entirely Trump supporters. Let's check out some of these highlights. This is what it looked like early on the first day. Actually, it's a small room for this type of event, but it was actually relatively full on the first day. Let me be clear. It was relatively full on the first day. I should mention too, this wasn't just something that Peter was into. The entire community and right-wing community that there was some sort of election fraud, etc., etc. We were very into this one. Mike Lindell's going to come out and take these things, fix these up. I'm going to come out and provide such solid evidence that there was election fraud and tampering with China that at the end of my symposium, Biden might resign. That's how sure he was that his evidence was convincing people. Surprised he didn't actually provide any evidence. So this was something that a ton of conspiracy theorists on the right were excited about.
And as the days went on, and didn't provide any evidence, it was actually interesting seeing them sort of shift on the forums or on like regulation.net as they sort of realized, oh no, we look like idiots again. Literally, I saw comments of people who said something along the lines of, I told my non-believer friends to watch this, and now I'm embarrassed. Should be told them to watch their friends. But like, this thing just says, oh no, this is Mr. F8. Oh, I thought it was a bit. This is big monkey. Hello. They hacked him in playing that, unironically, because he was hacked. And there are a lot of technical issues during this presentation, as you can imagine, because it's run by older people who have a loose grasp on technology at best. So every time, like, their live streams were going down or choppy, or the like Skype calls they were having with people, whatever that didn't work out, they'd be like, the deep state is hacking us. So funny. Expert says, welcome back again. I hope you're enjoying the We actually, like I said, we're not getting furniture in until the 9th, just because the movers are always behind everything right now. But we did buy a couch today, a nice sectional, going to live in the middle of the six. We'll finally have something other than the bed to sit on. That's nice. So, let's take a look at some of these clips. This is just what it looked like before the thing started. This is people filing in. You get it. Here he is, saying Friends Meet was attacked. Friends Meet is weird, self-absorbed, sites. Not the technology! The technology was attacked! Ice Queen says they didn't consent to being pixelated. I understood that reference. Princess Amelia says, but they hacked the election and then they hacked Mike Lindell, and now they hacked me to send these bits. Is there no end to their powers? I think they want to send your bit. They can hack anything they want. Big Basis, thanks for 9 months. That's a sub baby. This sub baby's name is Mike Lindell. Sorry, I have the bit set very low.
Yeah, you're not expecting this. We have a backup plan. They're hooking out now. This was attacked. The whole technology was attacked.
The whole technology? If you want to think it was part of the technology, but it's the whole technology. Oh no. Sage says use these bits to pay your experts in cyber multipass.
Today, you better melt down those machines and use them for prison bars. Dominion. Guess what? After today, you better melt down those machines and use them for prison bars.
And this comes up during the symposium. Mike Lindell, along with Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani, are being sued by Dominion for over $1 billion for defamation, libel, and slander. Probably libel. They probably wrote something down, right? They publish anything, and they're low for slander, right? For defamation. And Mike Lindell is doing this. Not great. We'll talk about what happened with that lawsuit later on. It does come up during the symposium, which is fun. Land Rick from Cosmetics came out as trans and working well, sharing the hype. Thanks for being a role model. Thanks for that. I really agree with that. That's awesome. Oh, this is the greatest thing ever. It is so funny.
We're going to put up the big line. There will be New Hampshire. It'll be all blue, right? It's like an election day. And then we go, what? New Hampshire goes to Donald Trump by 40,000 votes. That's the truth.
So, the main thing that they did, the first day of the cyber symposium, and I hope there's video of that somewhere in here. Let's see if I can find it. Cyber symposium. slide show, well, PowerPoint, slide show, PowerPoint. So, the main presentation that was done, like, on the first day of the symposium was this, and it's very funny. Killjoy says, did you read one American News Network's math expert who said Biden cheated ended up being a random guy with no math experience? Yes, it turned out he had not gone to college. I think he was involved in some sort of previous crime. Don't quote me on that. I think he had something to do with fraud. I really don't. And he currently works for a playground equipment installation company. And hey, I'm not faulting that. You know, there's the laborers are doing more stuff. But he's not qualified to talk about mathematics in regard to election statistics. Marcus Gray from says well. So this is part of the PowerPoint that Mike McDowell put on. And he said he was like going to do evidence. I'm going to bring evidence to prove that Trump won the election. And this is what he did. Let's see if we can spot the problem. If I trust anyone to tell me who's going to win an election, it's a pillow salesman. He did this with all 50 states. He went through all 50 states. Now, Chad, what's the problem with this evidence? Chad, what's the problem with this evidence? There isn't any. Yes, Princess Amelia, you are right. There is no evidence. This is what we call in the biz a claim. If you want to make a claim, that's fine. Don't make any claims. I don't expect anyone to take it seriously unless you find backing for those claims. He literally just put different numbers on a PowerPoint slide and was like, there it is. This is what happened. And then the people in the audience are like, yay! You made a PowerPoint slide. That's true. You know what the words look true on the slide. That's defined in fact. I'm not a lawyer. I'm 12 friends with 400 level classes, sort of a half level. Check out all the courses. That's good. I just kind of like what's going on here. Like I had earlier today, sort of screen here on both sides. I wouldn't go out like this. First screen, it's so forth. So forth. You guys go from 149 to 50 states. I remember what he said. It's close. It was fine. It was still much closer. I barely won. All the money separate times. Okay, I am done with that is announced during. Okay, spoiler. I'm going to tell you things that happened during the symposium. First of all, it broke that the guy who's giving like this information is a known con artist. And secondly, also during the symposium, the judge on definition things from that's like $1,000 for over $1,000. Mike Liddell was like positive that it's going to be dropped, but the judge during the cycle supposed to and the actually I read some of the judges it's fucking brutal. The judge is like, no, this is basically the exercise on the grounds of would have reasonable he said, not only is that reasonable, it's likely. Oh no, what happened to my headphone? It came off. Because I don't use this headphone for anything. Oh, there you go. This is going to come later, but I do want to talk about that's all. They attacked their technology. So, video conferencing or this one of the code monkeys is it's long walk. You don't know who the law cases are. They're few. More specifically, they're the most and when people go to the chance, you get a little bit more or if they could on this walking story and on the website and you have to know but now go on it sounds about the stuff now Peter even listening to go on the vehicles doesn't understand just God is protecting you. Anyway, so he showed up. I have this data leak. Look at this data leak. And in the middle of this happening, Ron's lawyer told him to stop the video because this data was stolen. This data was stolen from some state election systems and being investigated currently. So someone who was worked at that place stole this data from their county, sent it to Code Monkeys, who is you. You brought that stolen data to the cyber symposium, and in the middle of presenting it, Bob's lawyer screamed at him, "You need to take this down now." Yeah, it's Colorado. I apologize. I'm very gross today. I'm tired. I'm a little right now. So I'm this is sort of a tentative office experience, but I'm gonna do it in an office. Right. So welcome. Today we're looking at the highlights of Michael Bell's cyber symposium. Try to prove that intellectual story can come. Someone yells out. Someone took all of the hard drives from base analysis now. So what happened was, I was ordered that people didn't space without authorization. The actual hard drives from the basic called on a packet book. Hard drives and returned it to the program. And actually stopped this Lawyer team done.
Let's call that for what it is. But, you know, that maybe people stood up for them. Small business people.
Like it was because he harassed people. What?
There's no breaks. We're streaming 72 hours live stream. So around the world, this never stops. I'm not going to go into that fun, but I'm staying up here for 72 hours before the road.
Miners that were voting. We had 3 children in a trench coat going up to the voting booth. And then they leave and they switch positions so the bottom one was the head and they vote 3 times.
We have the president's son, Eduardo, out there,
Or should I?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the guy in California.
Ohio, but it was 7%. My expected was 15%. Or double the mark. $12 million I spent my own money getting investigated. I don't like that after Tony Evans began doing for the last 6 months to get this ready for the cyber symposium. I'm like, what? I'll be $12 million out of Setember. Like, I don't know. Yeah, like it was $1 million, and we'll figure out all the fraud. Things like that. False things, sniper, you know. And I it doesn't understand scam. Kind of funny.
Did you know? On Google.
million this night, it don't matter. People say, my name is poorly. You don't have a country, so I don't have a company there. My employees are at nobody has a does it matter? It doesn't matter if you don't have a country. I put millions of dollars in this thing. Oh, you're the best evidence listening in the world. It's not going to matter. See the government completely discovered.
No. Those lawsuits got thrown out due to lack of evidence. There wasn't any evidence, Mike. That was the whole problem with those cases.
There's more evidence.
We have enough evidence to convince everyone in the country. Guys, like the Delta picked us. Later. Peter's taking all of this stuff, and sometimes they decided to do that for some reason, but also it's not that about Peter's law. Quick aside, basically, it was like, everything's on this. I said an article called up like sometime next month. Peter's already going to do about have Peter's reports of it, so.
Dominion, guess what? After today, you better melt down those machines and use them for prison bonds.
Don't want the government to raid your office. Don't commit crime. Oh no. Why did someone send me this? Yeah, this is John from yeah, they're from the FBI. You don't have to. I can just say that we're on the shows people at this event. Did you not ask the guy at the show to think to? Let's say the FDA and FBI break the fund office. They went over to Baja and they did this in Baja. They took Baja off something like that. Back to my office. And they left. I dropped and asked Baja what they said. I went like, I don't know what they said. They're right in the office. Turn off your autoplay next time.
That's not why I'm here. That's not why I'm here. I know I'm not here.
Oh, this guy's a weird This is the person that has helped damage democracy more than the entire universe. Basically, he's done more damage to American democracy than any enemy of the United States. This guy. I'll be real. USSR people assholes will take you down. That's why.
Okay. So what we're gonna do then is figure this out together because there's so much happening.
Look at that! This is a cyber symposium. They're supposed to be experts, not just like basics of computers. They're supposed to be experts like program ciphering, data logs, and shit like that. And they can't figure out how to do a goddamn Skype call.
I got well. You like it,
In our election system, and play them. I just, the world is different. If you told me that this is like a city, some kid in the year 2000 was playing on their Twitter, and that's the end. Just play it and try to fuck it up and dumb shit. That makes more sense. This is dumb. I think that's
Sim, sim. Ok. Pensei que era antes.
Vê lá as horas que isso já são 6.
Já sei, ok.
Yeah, we didn't do something immediately, but because we thought, I'm fairly certain, there's one more check all this smoke that we're looking at, and I think at the bottom, I think that's why they are reading offices, freaking out. I believe that's why they're using the big tech to silence everyone. They are trying to silence the big lie, and the big lie is that the money is
running our elections for a very long time, and they had to do it so much this time because of how much support we had for the individual that ran, that they do everything they could to make sure they never lost again. And they go in there and overplay their hand. They can't do it at this point. Yeah.
I think it was also the first time of first. This was a post sort of like that. I was just talking on the stage, you know, that they want to be fresh and like, you know, like, kind of big shit around.